Chapter 61. Weak Hatred. Gwen runs along the face of a building, feeling absurdly like the handle on a kite while the monster tears the city apart. She's been leading him for almost 30 seconds, and 3 buildings have already been reduced to rubble in his wake. Down on the street, Wolverine finally drops from the 23rd floor and hits pavement, sprinting toward the chaos. He reaches the block where Gwen and the Abomination had been, only to look up and see they've already vaulted to another rooftop. "Shit, can't you two just fight on the ground?" he growls, then pushes his bulk forward without stopping. He can't fly, has to rely on those 2 heavy legs to chase after a couple of people who swing between buildings like Tarzan. Gwen thinks fast. If this keeps up, Broadway's going to be a ruin. Better to lure the monster somewhere with fewer structures. The fewer the buildings, the less the collateral damage. A sudden scarlet beam stabbed down from the sky and slammed into Abomination's chest, tearing him off the rooftop and hurling him onto the street below. Cyclops and the others had arrived. A sleek silver fighter hovered over the scene, and Scott stood in the open hatch with his arms folded, watching. Scott's optic blasts drew on an almost extra-dimensional reservoir of red energy. Whenever he opened his eyes, that energy could be released as a destructive beam. Because a childhood head injury left him with poor instinctive control, he relied on a ruby quartz visor Beast had engineered for him. Scott's skull could generate a protective force field around his head, and Beast had used the field's data to design the visor. The visor and the natural field operated on the same frequency, so the ruby quartz effectively contained and regulated his power. A small dial on the side let Scott fine-tune the intensity and width of the beam. On the street, the fallen Abomination pushed himself up, watching the charred muscles across his chest stitch themselves back together with terrifying rapidity. Abomination grinned, sprang up, and leaped toward the fighter jet hovering above them. Colossus watched him go, his skin already paling to a silvery white, and called out, "Phoenix, give me some thrust!" He sprinted, leapt from the jet, and hurtled straight at Abomination. Phoenix, perched on the aircraft, extended her right hand and shoved him with a burst of telekinetic force. Mid-air, Colossus's body completed its transformation into metal, his frame swelling until he was a towering ironclad figure over 2 meters tall. Massive, but still smaller than the hulking Abomination. Riding the push from Phoenix, Colossus drove his fist into Abomination's face, catching the monster off guard. At the same instant, Abomination's own blow smashed into Colossus's abdomen. The impact thudded outward, but the metal that had replaced Colossus's flesh held fast. It wasn't ordinary steel. Colossus's mutant power let him exchange the atoms in his body for atoms from another dimension, producing a silvery white metal that looked like osmium. It was exceptionally dense and incredibly hard, virtually unmatched, surpassed only by vibranium and adamantium. As long as the damage didn't exceed 70% of his body, Colossus could slowly recover through steelification. In that state, his strength and mobility remained intact. Abomination's punch hit him like striking a slab of steel, the same dull, immovable impact a normal person would feel against metal. He couldn't budge Colossus. The only sound was a metallic clang. The force sent Abomination flying backward. He smashed onto the ground and skidded. Colossus followed, landing in the classic 3-point superhero pose. A fighter jet touched down nearby, and Liana climbed out. She looked at Colossus's stance and couldn't hide a wince. "Doesn't that hurt your knees?" she asked. Colossus turned his head. "In this state it's hard for me to get hurt," he said. "I don't feel pain." Abomination spat blood, eyes burning with rage. "Another metal giant," he snarled. "I, Abomination, admit you're strong. Gee, now I'll tear you to pieces." Liana stepped in front of Colossus, shielding him with her body. "Go, Colossus," she said. "I'll give you my luck." She reached out with her luck sense and immediately picked up a powerful presence overhead, not far away, someone with luck far above the norm. "Good. That's him." Nearby, a man smiled and reached for his power. He siphoned a streak of good fortune from a nearby civilian and funneled it into Colossus, while at the same time tugging luck away from the Abomination to weaken the monster's edge. High above the ruined city, Bruce Banner peered down at the destruction. He'd already decided there was only one answer: Hulk. He stepped to the open hatch of the fighter, turned to Betty Ross, and forced a reassuring smile. Betty, wait for me. I'll be right back. He jumped out. The wind tore at his clothes and his stomach fell. Panic climbed his throat. Hulk, come out, now! He begged himself, trying to force the change. Before it could happen, something huge struck him. A delivery truck clipped Banner as he neared the pavement, sending him skidding and bouncing like a stone across the asphalt. When the dust settled, he lay there, limp and bruised, sprawled on the road. The truck driver pulled over for a beat, confused. Huh, I could have sworn there wasn't a speed bump there. Was that a dog? He shook his head, muttered about not wanting animal control involved, and drove off, leaving the scene. Liana stared down at Banner, who lay bloody and mangled at her feet. He was the powerful target she had sensed. He shouldn't have ended up like this, not even with a little less luck on her side. She scratched her head, frowning. Had her control slipped? She stepped back a few paces, keeping her distance from the fallen Banner. In front of her, Abomination was raining blows on Colossus, but something about the fight felt wrong. Abomination knew he was stronger than the silver-white, iron-skinned man across from him. By his estimate, maybe twice as strong, and yet his punches barely did anything. He couldn't even rock the other man's stance. Colossus slammed an iron fist into Abomination's head, and for a moment stars exploded across Abomination's vision, but the blow caused no real damage. Even though Colossus was benefiting from Liana's luck boost, and Abomination had been weakened by her influence, the gap in actual effectiveness was still glaring. Colossus simply couldn't land anything that would seriously hurt him. Peter, control him, Liana called from behind. Colossus read the opening instantly. He took Abomination's punch squarely, used the impact to hook the creature's wrists, and locked him in place. Abomination bellowed, "You lump of iron! What do you think you're doing?" Liana snapped back. "Shut up, you ugly monster!" A shimmering rift opened above Abomination's head. Liana dove out of it, wielding a massive blade of light, the tip aimed straight at his back. With the force of her leap and the sword's razor edge, she drove the blade more than halfway into him, then drew it down in a single motion, ripping a long, brutal gash across his back. Abomination howled in pain, his strength instantly ebbed. Colossus seized the moment. He threw his weight backward, toppled Abomination to the ground, rolled over, and pinned him under his metallic bulk. "Nice work, little snowflake," he praised. Liana walked up, hauled Abomination's head up by the hair, and laughed. "This guy wasn't even that tough. Piece of cake." A staffer carrying a camera hustled forward and called out, "Quick, strike a cool pose. Magic, point your light sword at its head. Colossus, put your foot on its chest. Cyclops and Phoenix, flank it on either side. Liana, give us a peace sign off to the side." With a click, the camera captured the superheroes posed triumphantly over the terrifying monster they'd just defeated. Chapter 62, Betty Ross, Hulk Power. Gwen dropped down from the rooftop and landed in front of them. "Are you all superheroes from Marvel Clash?" "That was amazing." Leon felt a flicker of recognition. After a quick probe of her luck, he said in surprise, "You're the woman I ran into at the company earlier today." "You recognized me that fast?" Gwen replied, surprised. She hadn't even taken off her mask. Nearby, the bloody, battered form of Banner began to change. Flesh rippled, skin darkened to a deep green, and his frame swelled. Leon glanced at the shifting figure and murmured, horrified, "Is he mutating?" Everyone turned toward Banner. A huge green hand clawed its way out of the wreckage, followed by a bestial roar. "Hulk!" Cyclops Scott said with certainty. "He must be the Hulk Klein mentioned." Leon's concern sharpened. "Is he going to attack us? That would be bad." From earlier tampering with Banner's luck, he'd learned the man's condition was highly unstable, fragile enough that a little interference could snap him. He reached out again, felt the Hulk's luck, and redistributed it. Hulk felt his anger ebbing. His eyelids grew heavy. He wanted nothing more than to sink back into Banner and sleep. Banner had come to New York with one goal, to eliminate the Hulk once and for all. He'd tracked down an online contact, someone who called himself Mr. Blue, who'd used the blood Banner sent him to develop a serum designed to suppress the Hulk's power. Banner, determined to destroy what he saw as the monster inside him, hadn't hesitated to inject it. That was why the Hulk felt so drained now. The serum was working. "Hulk wants to sleep," he grunted in a small, almost childlike voice, and his massive frame started to shrink. Within seconds, he had reverted to Banner. Banner lay unconscious, his clothes reduced by the fall, and the transformation to nothing more than boxer briefs. "Those are some good pants," Colossus said, eyeing the briefs with unexpected interest. "When he wakes up, I'm going to ask where he bought them." A few of the accompanying staff adjusted their monocles and moved into action. They found a large sheet, wrapped the abomination sprawled on the ground, and lifted the unconscious Banner onto the waiting fighter jet. One of the men, the one who looked like a captain, adjusted his monocle and announced, "Mission accomplished." At that moment, General Thaddeus Ross's armed helicopter touched down. Before Ross even climbed out, a woman leapt from the cab and ran straight toward Bruce Banner, calling his name. "Bruce! Bruce!" It was Betty Ross, Bruce's girlfriend and the general's daughter. She skidded to a halt in front of the newcomers and glared at them. "You're from Marvel Clash, aren't you? Abomination and the Hulk are military property. You can't take them." General Ross strode forward, voice hard. "I know you have an agreement with Congress, but that doesn't bind me." Amon, one of the visitor's staff, looked at Ross with a curious tilt of his head. "General, what are you saying?" Ross froze. He'd planned to answer, but whatever he intended to say slipped away as if plucked from his mind. He stared, disoriented, realization dawning that his thought had been wiped clean. Amon moved to take control of the situation. "All right, everyone, let's wrap this up. Ma'am, if you're worried about Bruce Banner, come with us. General, we won't pry into your thoughts. Take your time here. If your memory really is that bad, eat more fish," Amon joked, unable to resist a parting barb about Ross's slipping recall. They moved quickly, escorting Betty toward the waiting fighter. Ross stood in the wrecked street and watched them go, hands jammed in his pockets. He didn't call after his daughter. The thought never even occurred to him. When the jet lifted off and vanished into the stormy sky, he remained where he was, staring at the empty air as if he could will it to bring her back. Wolverine arrived a moment later, limping over the rubble with his coat flapping and a trail of grease on his knuckles. He walked, had the jet's contrail fade, then surveyed the scene of the fight, smoldering pavement, gouges in the asphalt, the faint scent of ozone. He spat to clear his mind and swore under his breath. "Damn, too late. They already wrapped it up." Not far away, Peter Parker came sprinting down the street, breath coming in sharp gasps. He leaned his shoulder against a lamppost and scanned the alleyways. "Gwen, where did you go? I didn't see her anywhere," he panted. He'd barely finished when someone tugged him into a side alley. Gwen stepped out from the shadows with an easy smile. "Hey, Pete," she said. "You worried I'd vanished?" Peter blinked and then asked, relief flooding him. "Are you okay? Did they take care of that thing?" He looked her over, taking in the scraped sleeve and the soot on her cheek. Gwen nodded. "Yeah. The superheroes from Marvel Clash showed up and handled the abomination. They cornered it and took it down. We're fine. That's a load off." Peter let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. "Let's get out of here. It's getting late." They started back together, weaving through the crowd of onlookers and emergency crews. Gwen glanced at him as they walked. "Peter, I remember your chemistry grades were always really good," she said. "Any chance you could help me with a few things? I've got a lab report due tomorrow that's been driving me crazy." Peter brightened, half embarrassed, half honored. "Oh, sure, I can help. Bring your notes over and we'll go through it." Gwen smiled, relieved. "Thanks. I'll email you the details." They picked up their pace toward the subway, shoulders brushing as they walked. Behind them, Ross still lingered in the street, the lights of the departing fighter a faint glow on the horizon. Wolverine watched him for a moment, then turned and stalked back toward the city, muttering about missed chances and bad timing. "You even got an A on the experiment, didn't you?" Gwen said. Peter looked a little puzzled. "Yeah. Why, Gwen? Want me to tutor you in chemistry? I thought your grades were pretty good, too." "No tutoring needed," Gwen replied quickly. "I'm happy with my marks. I was actually wondering if you could make a device that shoots webs. It doesn't have to be exact spider silk, maybe thicker strands. I think using webs to augment my abilities would be really useful." "Augment your abilities?" Peter rubbed his chin, thinking. "That's a great idea, but making actual spider silk isn't easy." Gwen's face fell a touch. Oh, I see. Peter's expression softened and he smiled. But I could substitute other materials. They'd probably be stronger than silk of the same thickness. Remember, I'm Professor Connor's intern, and Osborne Corp has been researching stuff like this. I know a bit about it. Gwen brightened almost at once, a smile coming back to her face. Gwen hugged Peter Parker tight. I knew there was nothing you couldn't do, Peter. Peter felt the pressure around his neck and almost choked, but he scratched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly. I'm not as amazing as you make me sound, Gwen. Really. The destruction abomination left behind had been cleaned up by the military, led, as always, by General Ross. After everything that had happened, it was unclear whether Ross would keep his command. At Marvel Clash, Betty sat at Bruce Banner's bedside. He still hadn't woken. A knock sounded at the door. When she opened it, Klein Moretti stood there. Relief washed over Betty's face. Thank you so much, Mr. Moretti, for taking Bruce away from my father, she said. I can't imagine what he would have done to Bruce otherwise. Klein shook his head and offered a small smile. Miss Ross, it was nothing. We're a superhero company. Helping people like Bruce is part of our job. He stepped inside, and once they were seated, explained why he had come. We've been monitoring Mr. Banner. Between the super soldier serum and the gamma exposure, another personality has emerged within him. When that personality takes over, Mr. Banner loses control and becomes something else. It's not just dangerous for others, it's destroying him from the inside. Betty listened, tension written on her face. Klein continued, more gently, we can keep him under close observation and begin treatment to stabilize him. It won't be easy, but we have the resources, both medical and containment, to try. Betty nodded, eyes wet but grateful. Thank you. Please, do whatever you can. Banner turns into the Hulk. His strength is far beyond anything human, Klein said. What I'm saying is, our company has a way to help him control that power so he doesn't lose himself and cause destruction. Betty's eyes went wide. A bright smile spread across her face. Really? That's incredible, Klein nodded. And there's more. We can give you the same kind of power. No side effects, and once it's administered, the abilities are fully controllable. I think you're going to need it. He smiled and held out a syringe to her. 63. New elements and a strong man who falls from the sky. Hulk-level strength? Betty took the syringe and asked, puzzled. You mean, yes? You're an ordinary person. Mr. Banner is a superhuman with incredible strength. You two don't belong to the same world. Even if you're together now, something will separate you in the future. But this, Klein's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. This can change things. It'll help you cross the barrier to Mr. Banner. Super strength, super jumping ability, near invincible defense and regeneration. Want to try it? No side effects. Klein's words were like a devil's temptation. Betty felt herself swayed, staring at the syringe in her hand as she raised it toward her arm. For a moment she forgot everything else. Klein halted her with a sharp hand on her wrist. Wait, not here. Any commotion will be huge and will alarm Mr. Banner. Betty blinked and pulled herself back, cheeks flushing with embarrassment at how impulsive she'd been. She nodded and followed Klein down the quiet corridor to the training room. It was early morning, the facility was empty, and the room echoed only with their footsteps. This will do, Klein said, setting the syringe on a padded bench. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. We need a controlled space where you can test the effects without risking anyone else. Betty swallowed and tried to steady her breathing. The promise of power pressed at the edges of her resolve, terrifying, intoxicating, and oddly irresistible. She watched Klein's face for any hint of deceit or danger, and what she saw was clinical curiosity, not malevolence. All right, she said at last, voice small but determined. Let's find out if this really works. This room is specially designed to contain any commotion. Klein said it matter-of-factly. Betty looked at the syringe in her hand and didn't doubt him. Klein might be a consummate swindler by trade, but he wasn't lying now. Her thoughts flicked to Bruce Banner, her father, and to the work she'd poured her life into. She loved Banner fiercely. If this serum could make her stronger, she could see him again when she was ready. Being with him mattered more than whatever risk she had to take now. She steadied her hand then, after a moment's hesitation, set the syringe down and turned to Klein. You do the injection, she said. Of course. That's what a gentleman should do. Klein took the syringe with exaggerated politeness. Madam, bear with me. This will sting a bit. He plunged the needle into Betty's outstretched arm. It won't be so bad. The needle's small, he added, half joking. Betty didn't flinch. As a cell biologist, she'd handled needles and injections many times. She wasn't afraid. But the moment the serum entered her bloodstream, the sensation was unlike any injection she'd ever felt. Something inside her reacted violently. A pressure, a heat, as if her cells themselves had started to fight. It felt as if every cell in her body were under attack, trembling, tearing, rearranging. Ah! Betty cried, clutching herself and dropping to her knees as heat climbed under her skin. Her cheeks and arms flushed a deep crimson. Her frame swelled. She grew, not to the Hulk's gargantuan scale, but to roughly the size of Colossus. The next morning, in Bruce Banner's small room, he blinked awake and came face to face with a red giant. He bolted upright, rolled off the bed, and blurted, "Hulk, why are you out? And why are you red?" He ducked his head behind the mattress and, trembling, peered at the figure. The red giant rolled her eyes. "Bruce, it's me, Betty." As her voice reached him, the enormous form receded, the crimson faded, and the giant shrank back into Betty Ross. "Betty, it's really you," Banner breathed, easing out from behind the bed. He stared, confused. "How did you become like this?" Betty shrugged, almost casual. "I turned into a giant too. Now I'm like you. My father can't very well arrest me, can he?" Bruce's expression softened. He understood. She had changed herself to be like him. Bruce said, his voice thick with feeling, "You don't have to do this for me." Betty smiled. "I like it. I feel strong. I don't get tired, and I don't get sick. If I'm like this, I can throw myself into my research full time." Banner felt it, something warm and grateful, and drew her into an embrace. They kissed, and at the same moment, both their bodies began to shift. One skin flushing green, the other reddening, muscles swelling until it looked as if two giants were about to tear the room apart. Clap, 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 applause, and a sharp voice cut through the moment. "Hey, this isn't a hotel, you two. My company can't handle two giants clapping in here. One wrong move and you'll shake the whole building down." Hearing the voice, both Banner and Betty froze. Their transformations stalled mid-change. They let go of each other awkwardly. "Ahem," Betty cleared her throat and quickly introduced them. "Bruce, this is Klein Moretti, the CEO of Marvel Clash. His people were the ones who pulled you out from my father's custody, and they were the ones who took down Bronski. Mr. Moretti says he can help you learn to control the Hulk." Banner stared. He'd been doing everything he could to avoid the military, but he had heard of Marvel Clash, the big superhero company. Hearing Moretti's offer left him stunned. It made sense that they could subdue Bronski after he became the Abomination. What Banner didn't believe was that they could help him control the Hulk. Banner had tried every method he could think of. Nothing had worked on the Hulk, only temporary suppression. Klein seemed to read his skepticism and smiled. "Mr. Banner, there's a solution for everything. Nothing is impossible. Try it before you draw conclusions. You have nothing to lose." Banner appreciated that Klein had noticed his doubt and answered quickly. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti." Tony stood holding the thin, triangular sheet of metal-like material while Ratchet examined it with keen interest. "Tony, your father was a genius," Ratchet said. "We Cybertronians have records of this element. Its energy closely resembles that of the legendary Tesseract. That kind of power is perfect for space applications. With it, building the ground bridge could be done far more quickly." Tony looked up, surprised. "Power space devices? I haven't finished testing it. So far, all I know is it can be integrated into the arc reactor." "The Tesseract, what is that exactly?" Ratchet replied. "The Tesseract is an artifact of Odin, the Allfather." Ratchet explained as he answered Tony's questions. "He rules the 9 realms. Earth is Midgard among them. Odin travels between worlds on the Bifrost, and the Bifrost was built on principles similar to those of the Tesseract." "Sounds like magic," Tony said. "But you said this element can drastically speed up construction of the ground bridge, so let's get started. I can't wait to see it." Ratchet moved to a corner of the lab and brought out a stack of components. "I've already prepared the basic parts. I was just waiting for the energy device. With your new element, the rest should go very quickly." Tony nodded approvingly. "I didn't expect you to be so reliable, Ratchet." Meanwhile, the weather in New Mexico turned violent. Amid thunder and driving rain, something like a meteor slammed into the desert, a hammer that struck the sand, and a naked man fell from the sky, landing on Dr. Jane Foster's car. Back at Stark's base, the entrance had been refitted. The stairs were gone, replaced by a slow-moving conveyor. Optimus Prime stepped onto it, was carried up to Tony's laboratory, and walked in carefully. I don't yet have the rest of the chapter. You only sent one line. To rewrite the whole chapter, I'll need the full machine-translated text. If you want, here's a quick improved version of the sentence you already gave, plus a couple of tone options so you can tell me which style you prefer for the full rewrite. Neutral, natural. Tony, why did he replace the stairs with a conveyor belt? That's odd. Slightly humorous. Tony, who swapped stairs for a conveyor belt? That's just weird. Formal, literary. Tony, why has he replaced the staircase with a conveyor belt? It strikes me as most peculiar. Send the full chapter, or paste it in several messages if it's long, and tell me any preferences, voice, level of polish, preserve, original quirks, American, British spelling, etc. I'll produce a polished, idiomatic English version that preserves all plot points and details. Chapter 64, The Ammonites Script. Optimus Prime stared in disbelief when he saw Tony and Ratchet. What happened to you two? He asked. Tony had deep, shadowed circles under his eyes, and a gaunt face that made him look like he hadn't slept in days. Ratchet looked physically intact, though his paint job was dull and scuffed. Despite their appearances, Ratchet greeted Optimus with a grin. Optimus, you couldn't have come at a better time. Tony and I finished building the ground bridge. Come see it. Optimus blinked. I thought you said it would take longer, energy shortages and all. How did you finish so fast? Ratchet's enthusiasm didn't waver. Tony and his father are geniuses, Prime. His father discovered a new element, and Tony and I followed the clues he left behind to recreate it. That element is perfect for spatial devices, so the ground bridge went up ahead of schedule. Optimus nodded, impressed. That's incredible. This is exactly what we need. Last night I picked up strange fluctuations from the Bifrost Bridge opening on Earth. There was a surge of powerful energy arriving there. I had originally planned to borrow one of Tony's planes, but now I could use the ground bridge directly. Tony, standing nearby, couldn't help but ask, the Bifrost? You mean Odin's? Yes, Optimus Prime said. Ratchet told me it's the Bifrost from Asgard. Tony's eyes lit up. Optimus, mind if I come with you to check out where it popped up? I might be able to use the data to improve the ground bridge. Optimus didn't refuse. Very well. Tony, you'll come with me. Ratchet, you stay at the base and control the ground bridge. Someone needs to operate it. He paused, looking at Tony with something like concern. But are you really all right in this state? It might be better for you to rest first. At Optimus's words, a sudden wave of drowsiness washed over Tony. Tony hesitated for a moment, then took off the spark watch from his left wrist and handed it to Ratchet. Ratchet, help me steal my fatigue, he said. Ratchet accepted the device, transformed it back into a glove, and slipped it onto his left hand. He hesitated. Tony, can it even steal fatigue? Of course, Tony answered. I've experimented with it. It can take more than just energy, abstract things too, like moods and emotional states. Optimus Prime stood nearby, watching with a look of utter bafflement. He had never heard of the spark glove. Ratchet, now wearing the red spark glove, turned the cuff counterclockwise. Tony's eyebrows twitched in expectation, but nothing happened. Ratchet tried again. Still nothing. He frowned and scratched his head. Tony sighed dramatically. It seems to have failed. As expected, stealing fatigue is hard work. He grinned and couldn't resist a bit of self-congratulation. Not everyone is as talented as I am. Tony Stark. Failure happens. Try a few more times. Ratchet obliged. He twisted the cuff a third time, then a fourth, adjusting his grip, concentrating. On the fifth attempt, there was a faint hum and a quick, invisible tug, like a pressure easing out of the air. Tony straightened, stretched his back, and breathed out, surprised and pleased. I feel so refreshed, he exclaimed. Optimus Prime's optics widened. He stepped forward, incredulous. How did you do that? Tony, you look a lot better. Like the fatigue has disappeared, Optimus Prime observed. Just a little gadget. Handy as hell, Tony replied, his voice flat but relieved. Optimus gave a small nod. Good. Since you've recovered, let's move out. I'll call Bumblebee. He's ideal for recon. In the New Mexico desert, S-Healed had Mjolnir ringed in 3 concentric security perimeters. A cluster of agents, some of them oddly wearing monocles, stood closest to the hammer, trading amused comments. "Is this supposed to be the legendary hammer?" one muttered. "It looks ridiculous, like some kind of meow-meow hammer." A few yards away, a group of sorcerers debated the real question: who could lift it? They introduced themselves with titles that sounded more like Perso, Naz than names: the Bizarro Sorcerer, the Scholar of Yore, the Mentor of Deceit, yet all of them answered to the same name, Amon. The multiple Amons bickered like a quarrelsome court. "Can you pick it up, Bizarro?" the secret sorcerer asked, smirking. Bizarro Amon blinked. "You're asking me that? Haven't you seen what happened with the Scholar?" The Scholar of Yore flushed. "Who said I couldn't pick it up? I can. Kind of. I summoned a historical projection to do the lifting, but my prime self refused to cooperate. The projection wouldn't count as me, so I couldn't call it up." "So you can't actually lift it," the Mentor of Deceit sneered. The Scholar shot back, irritated. "And what about you? Can you?" "So you can't pick it up either, can you?" one of the clones sneered. Amon, the Mentor of Deceit, answered with thin pride. "Of course I could pick it up, but doing so would trigger the runes Odin put on the Meow Meow hammer. He'd detect the disturbance instantly. That would be a mess I don't want to deal with." "You claim you can lift it without proof," another clone shot back. "That's no different from the rest of us. You still can't pick it up." "We agree," several voices chimed in, overlapping. Dark lines creased Amon's forehead. He had no good retort to that chorus. After a moment's pause, he produced a small notebook and addressed the clones more briskly. "The plan's proceeding as scheduled. Optimus Prime is en route. The clone inside the kid, Leon, has been instructed to bring him along. Thor has had no accidents either. Coordinating their meeting should be straightforward." "You do the coordinating," a clone said flatly. "We're just NPCs following orders." Amon's mouth twitched. He said nothing further. A shimmering bridge of blue light split the New Mexico desert as if the sky itself had opened. Through it strode a towering red and blue figure, Optimus Prime, followed by a smaller, yellow form that rolled and unfolded into Bumblebee. An Iron Man suit streaked through the portal behind them. Bumblebee's door swung open, and Leon climbed out, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The Iron Man helmet retracted its faceplate to reveal Tony Stark's familiar, mustached face. Tony glanced at Leon, who kept scanning the empty horizon, and said, "I still don't get why you had to come along, kid." As a high-ranking member of Marvel Clash, Tony had no trouble recognizing Leon, the newly emerged superhero. Leon scratched the back of his neck. "My power picked up something important nearby, so I was curious," he said out loud. Inside, though, Leon was thinking something else. Mr. Starr, the grandfatherly voice that lived in his head, had been nagging him to come. Leon's ability only reached a few hundred meters, so he couldn't sense anything farther off. He had followed Tony because the old man had been sure something would happen here. "Something interesting is going to happen. Aren't you always the protagonist? Protagonists have to be where the action is?" Mr. Starr had murmured, a faint, otherworldly echo in Leon's mind. Leon wanted to complain. "You still haven't told me what will happen," but he kept it to himself. Tony pursed his lips and gave up on scolding the kid. Leon always put on airs, and that kind of showmanship was the most annoying thing in the world to him. Tony turned to Optimus Prime and asked, "Optimus, is that the energy anomaly we're tracking?" He pointed toward the area ringed by S-Healed agents and barricades, a park that had been sealed off and converted into a temporary base. Optimus Prime focused for a moment, extending his sensors over the perimeter. After a brief scan, he nodded. "Yes," he said. "This is it. There's a strong energy residue here." Chapter 65, Hammer. They drew attention the moment they arrived. The agents and staff inside the S-Healed base noticed them at once. In less than a minute, Agent Coulson, whose hairline had crept back even further, was standing before them. "Hello, Optimus Prime, Stark, Bumblebee, and Leon? Leon, what are you doing here?" He greeted them one by one, but when his eyes landed on Leon, he couldn't hide his surprise. He hadn't recognized him at first. Leon's skin had almost entirely returned to normal, but his hair had gotten much fluffier, which threw Coulson off. Leon stepped forward with a grin. "Hey, Coulson, Long time no see. Looks like your hairline's slipping again. Must be that bald black guy squeezing you dry. I told you not to pamper him. He'll just take advantage of you more and more. Coulson cleared his throat. Leon, don't say things like that, especially not out loud. Leon shrugged, unbothered. So what? I've already changed jobs. I'm a superhero now. That black bald egg can't control me anymore. Agent Coulson's eyelids twitched, but he said nothing at first. He looked up at Tony Stark and asked, Stark, what are you doing here? This isn't anywhere near New York, is it? Tony didn't answer the question directly. Instead, he muttered, U.S. S.H.I.E.L.D. folks are fast. Beat us here, huh? Then he turned and started walking into the base, ignoring Coulson. Wait, Stark? Coulson called after him. This is a S.H.I.E.L.D. facility. Unauthorized personnel aren't allowed in. He was about to push the point further when an arm looped through his. Leon hooked him by the elbow, grinning. Coulson, we're practically family. It's just walking into a base. Don't be so uptight. Coulson paused and let them pass. He knew better than to expect Tony to listen, and with Optimus Prime and Stark both here, taking firm action would be pointless. Above all, he had no desire to pick a fight with Tony and the others. They walked into the base, and Agent Coulson began to fill them in. Early this morning, we picked up an abnormal energy signature near New Mexico. When I got here, I found this. He gestured toward a huge crater carved into the center of the facility. Oh, you found a meteorite or a satellite, Tony said, already half smirking. Optimus Prime studied the crater for a long moment, then turned to Tony. Tony, if I'm not mistaken, that is neither meteorite nor satellite. Let us take a closer look. They moved to the center of the crater, where a hammer lay embedded in the ground. Tony peered at it with obvious curiosity. You guys are seriously cautious. You actually built the base around this to protect it? Coulson gave a small, awkward shrug. It's not that we wanted to build here. We couldn't move the hammer. Is it contaminated? Some alien virus? Or is it too fragile to move? Tony asked, even more intrigued. Neither, Coulson said. He reached out and patted the handle, his voice carrying the faint amusement of someone settling in to watch a show. Try lifting it. It doesn't look heavy. Damaging the site isn't my fault, Tony said, finishing his sentence. He unclipped his helmet, stepped out of the suit, set his hand on the hammer's handle, and pulled. It didn't budge. Tony let go, waved his right hand, and the armor snapped back into place around him. The armored gauntlet closed around the handle. Metal creaked and clanged as the suit strained, but the hammer did not move. Not convinced, Tony fired the thrusters in the suit's arms. The servos whined and the armor complained of overloads, energy humming through its joints, yet the hammer stayed stubbornly still. This thing's weird, he muttered. Not bolted to something massive underneath, is it? Realizing brute force wasn't working, he gave up and started examining the ground and soil around the hammer for a weakness. Let me try, Leon said eagerly. He rolled up his sleeves, took hold of the handle, and heaved. So heavy, like pulling up a lamppost, he said, surprised. Agent Coulson shivered as a cold prickle ran down his spine, an uneasy feeling that something bad was about to happen. He scanned the area and found nothing out of the ordinary. That's strange, he said. The last time I felt like this was a few months ago, and I had bad luck for a whole week after. It's not going to happen again, is it? Agent Coulson whispered to himself. Forget it. I can't lift it either. Leon said, letting go of the hammer and stepping back. Coulson tested it for a moment more and found, to his relief, that he couldn't pick it up either. The oppressive sense of doom that had been pressing on him moments before suddenly lifted. He glanced at Bumblebee, who was watching with obvious curiosity. Bumblebee, you try it. Maybe you can lift it, Coulson suggested. Okay, I'll try, Bumblebee replied. He rubbed his hands together nervously, grabbed the hammer's handle, and, amid grinding servos and straining hydraulics, the ground beneath him began to crack. Still, Mjolnir would not budge. Bumblebee let go with a frustrated huff. Optimus Prime didn't try to lift the hammer. Instead, he stepped closer to study the markings etched into its head. The patterns are runic, he said, associated with Odin, the All-Father. Legend says Odin, king of the gods, discovered the Well of Wisdom. Optimus Prime read the inscription aloud. To gain wisdom, he sacrificed one of his eyes, drank from the Well of Wisdom, and hung himself upside down on the World Tree for 9 days and 9 nights, finally mastering the power of runes. He shifted slightly and scanned further. There's another line. Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. That appears to be an enchantment. Tony and Agent Coulson exchanged looks. Tony wasn't surprised. Optimus had already briefed him on Asgard, but Coulson was visibly shaken. He'd never seriously considered that mythological figures might be real. You mean Odin? The Odin from Norse mythology? Coulson asked, incredulous. And this hammer is Thor's? Based on the information here, your understanding is correct, Agent Coulson, Optimus replied. Tony leaned in. So that's the catch? Optimus, are you saying anyone who can lift this hammer becomes Thor? Optimus's tone was measured. That is what the inscription claims. I cannot verify its truth. Tony smirked. Sounds familiar, like King Arthur and the sword in the stone. Could this hammer be the same kind of artifact? Lift it, and you not only gain Thor's power, but become the king of Asgard? I'm not Odin. I can't answer that. Optimus Prime said nothing more, then closed his fingers around Mjolnir's handle. His frame dipped slightly under the weight. After watching Tony and Bumblebee try it, he deliberately gathered himself, bracing his servos and hydraulics before he pulled. As he heaved upward, the sky immediately darkened, and a bolt of lightning struck the hammer. Chapter 66. Loki appears. Far away in the halls of Asgard, Odin had drained too much of his divine power, saving Thor and the others from the frost giants. Loki's taunts had stirred him further, his energies flaring out of control until he was forced into the Odin's Leap sooner than he should have. Asgardians grow stronger with age, their power accumulates. Odin's power had become so immense that his body could no longer sustain it without rest, so he must regularly sink into the long, recuperative sleep that bears his name. Even as his body lay in that deep slumber, Odin's mind remained alert, able to sense events across the realms. Suddenly his eyelids twitched. A disturbance reached him. Mjolnir had been lifted, but not by Thor. Someone on Midgard had picked up the hammer. Someone on Midgard can actually lift Mjolnir. The thought hit him like a cold wind. Back on Midgard, not far from the Asseald base, Thor, now stripped of his divine powers, was finishing his discharge paperwork at a hospital with Jane Foster. Trailing behind her, he grumbled indignantly. You Earthlings are truly rude to treat Thor so badly, he complained. What is that small black stick that woman has? He was, of course, pointing at the stun gun in Daisy's hand. The previous night, Thor had been knocked out by the stun gun in Daisy's hand. As she moved ahead, Daisy glanced back, tapped her temple, and pointed at Thor as if to ask Jane, "Is there something wrong with his head?" Jane only nodded. She, too, had the uneasy sense that something was off with Thor. Then the sky darkened and thunder rolled. Thor's whole body suddenly went rigid. He stared, wide-eyed, as a bolt of lightning split the sky, and he felt his hammer lift as if by another's hand. "No, Mjolnir!" he cried, dropping to his knees and burying his face in his hands. Daisy watched him with mild curiosity and a teasing smile. "What's with the meow-meow? Scared of thunder?" she asked. Thor didn't hear her. He was inconsolable, caught up in the misery of being separated from his hammer. A few yards away, Optimus Prime stumbled, arm braced on the ground to keep from toppling. He was surprised at the hammer's weight, far lighter than he'd expected. It felt like, at most, 20 kilograms. He couldn't understand it. If he alone could pick it up so easily, how had Bumblebee and the others been unable to lift it? Lightning crackled down and struck the hammer again. "This hammer really is a lightning rod," Tony called out, half in awe, half in show. Optimus Prime's chassis began to glow. Electric filaments danced along his plating, tracing lightning-like patterns across his metal. With a shout, "All right," he lifted Mjolnir high and brought it down. Bolts fanned out in every direction, and a violent shockwave thundered toward the onlookers. Tony yanked his helmet closed as the blast hit. Lucky timing, he'd just gotten back into the suit. Bumblebee spun, pressing a dazed Leon and Agent Coulson to his chest to shield them. The concussive arcs fried every piece of electronic equipment in the Asseald base. Stark's armor righted itself, and he pushed to his feet, annoyance lacing his voice. "Optimus Prime, so now that you've got new power, you ditch your old friends? How heartless." Bumblebee brushed himself off and set Leon and Coulson down. Both were still wobbling from the blast. Optimus sounded embarrassed. "Sorry, A surge of energy built up inside me, and I couldn't hold it back. Tony didn't sound too worried. His earlier jab had been mostly for effect. Tony cocked his head, curiosity written all over his face. "Optimus Prime," he said, "have you become Thor? Are you going to Asgard to claim the throne? Is someone coming to pick you up?" Optimus shook his massive head. "I don't know about thrones. What I do know is this is Mjolnir, and my sensors and my intuition tell me Thor is nearby." "Thor? The original owner of the hammer?" Tony's eyes lit up. "So he's close by. Did he abdicate and leave the hammer here to choose a successor?" He hesitated, then added, "Quick, set it down. Let me try lifting it again. Maybe whatever mechanism you triggered is different now. If it's in a different position, I might be able to get it." Tony's tone was equal parts hopeful and offended. He wasn't ready to concede. Optimus regarded him with a mixture of sympathy and bluntness. "Tony," Optimus said, "it won't work. I've learned something from lifting this hammer. Only those who are worthy can use it. I'm sorry, but you are not worthy." Despite his words, Optimus gently set Mjolnir back on the ground. He wanted Tony to try, so Tony could really see the truth for himself. Tony's jaw tightened. "How can I, Tony Stark, not be worthy?" he protested, already moving to grasp the handle. "It must be the posture," Tony muttered, striking another exaggerated pose as if that would somehow change the laws of enchantment. Even theatrics couldn't help. Mjolnir did not budge. Optimus Prime picked the hammer up, placed it back on the stone pillar where it had first rested, and shook his head. "It does not belong to me. I do not understand why I can lift it, but its master remains the myth called Thor. We should find him. For now, leave the hammer here, on the pillar, where no one else can take it." Tony finally abandoned his attempts and crossed his arms. "How are we supposed to find this Thor? We don't even know if he's human. Records indicate Asgardians are indistinguishable from humans by appearance," Optimus said. "He should be nearby. I can sense him." Coulson, who'd been staring at the wreckage of the base, suddenly spoke up. The damage gnawed at him, not because he'd have to pay for the broken equipment, but because Fury would inevitably use it as an excuse to lean on him even harder. Seeing an opening in the conversation, he offered, "Eshield can help with that. We can pull surveillance from the surrounding area and access some housing records. That'll be useful," someone said. Tony smiled. "All right, Eshield still has its uses." After a few more words, the group left the meteor crater where Mjolnir sat. As they departed, a figure in a reindeer costume appeared beside the hammer. It was Loki. He planted his hand on the hammer's handle and tried again and again to lift it, but it wouldn't budge. "Damn it," he muttered, frustrated. "That damn cybernetic robot could lift it, and I can't. Ridiculous." He stamped his foot. "Oh ho, Bambi's about to cry." A chorus of snide voices answered from behind him. "Oh look, Bambi's looking at us. What should we do?" "It's normal. After all, the third princess always cries." "Poor, unloved child." Loki wheeled around. Standing there were a few men with monocles, smirking. He narrowed his eyes. "Who are you? How can you see me?" The monocle wearers chuckled. "Oh dear, Bambi is looking at us." "What will we do?" one said. "Don't worry, I'll just take his memories later." Loki's temper flared. "Hey, what are you doing?" he snapped. "Are you listening to me?" he snapped. As the words left his mouth, the small knot of onlookers parted, and Loki stepped forward again as if nothing had happened, placing himself before Mjolnir and trying to lift it. "For heaven's sake, how can that Cybertron robot pick up the hammer when I can't? Damn it, damn it!" he muttered, frustration sharpening every syllable. Chapter 67. Decadent Thor Bang. A cup shattered on the floor. Thor banged his fist on the table and shouted, "Another one!" Daisy endured the annoyed stares from the other patrons and shot him a warning look. "Hey, Thor, that's the 5th cup you've broken tonight. If it weren't for those looks of yours that made Jane fall for you, I would have stopped putting up with you ages ago." She turned to the bartender and forced a sheepish smile. "He's not all there tonight. We'll pay for everything at the end." The bartender handed Thor another beer. Thor grabbed it, drained half in one gulp, then slumped back and announced in a theatrically mournful tone, "My beloved ran off with someone else. I have nothing left." Daisy's mouth twitched. She pictured the inevitable melodrama. Handsome Thor comes home and finds his wife in another man's arms. She sneers, "He's richer than you. You've got nothing but your looks. Get out." Incensed, Thor storms out in the middle of the night, runs wildly down the road, and is hit by a car, coming back from that moment with a few screws loose. She waved a hand at him. All right, it's just a woman. She left you. Find someone new. I think Jane's pretty great, Daisy blurted out, betraying her mentor in one breath. She stole a quick look at Thor's broad shoulders. She wasn't blind to his physique, but she'd never want a lunatic for a boyfriend. Thor froze, then sank into a deeper gloom. You don't understand, he said, voice thick. My hammer has been with me for 1,000 years, and today, it just won't have me anymore. He downed his drink and slammed the empty glass onto the floor. It shattered. Another one, he demanded. Thor, that's the 6th. Daisy snapped, annoyed. Stop breaking stuff. I've got to pay for all of these. Outside, Leon stood in front of the door and listened to the racket spilling out. He shook his head in disbelief. No way. Thor's really in a place like this? He muttered. Asgardians have a taste for drink, Amon's disembodied voice replied in his ear. Thor Odinson is the worst of them. He's in there. Leon nodded and pushed through the door. The bar matched his expectations. Loud, crowded, a haze of stale alcohol and shouted conversations. He threaded through burly, reeking men, found a spot at the bar, and ordered a beer. He sipped slowly while taking in the room. Most of it was just the usual chaos, until he noticed the burly man who kept smashing his cups on the floor. The man's grief made the bar's disorder feel personal. He looked like he'd taken a hard hit. Doesn't look like Thor at all, Leon muttered under his breath, then turned to the woman sitting to his right. Excuse me, have you noticed anyone strange in the bar? Like a guy who keeps saying he's a god? He asked. Daisy glanced over and after a moment nodded toward the man still hunched over his drink. He was disheveled, but there was something that made her think he could be attractive under different circumstances. That one, she said. He keeps going on about being Thor. He's the oddest person here. Thor's ears twitched as if he'd heard them. Him? Leon repeated, incredulous. To Leon, the man looked like nothing more than a heavy drinker, worn, fallible, entirely unmythic. Yes? Daisy said in a low voice, leaning in as if she feared being overheard. He keeps saying he's Thor. I think he's unstable. His wife left him, apparently. Leon nodded and lowered his voice as well. Do you know him? He asked. I'm with the FBI. I'm looking into a mentally unstable subject, the lunatic, who often claims to be a god. I think this might be him. He flashed an FBI badge, one he still carried from the days when he had been working as an agent for S.H.I.E.L.D. Although he was no longer an agent, he still had S.H.I.E.L.D. gear, along with several FBI and CIA IDs that all showed up in the system. Daisy's eyes widened. For a moment she was at a loss for words. She collected herself and forced out an explanation. I don't know him, she said. I only met him yesterday. He crashed into our K.R. and then started acting weird. I'm just watching him for now. Nothing to do with him. I've always thought he wasn't right. Daisy tried to put distance between herself and the drunk, but Leon had already figured out the important detail. The man at the table was probably Thor. Thor, an alcoholic. Leon almost laughed at the thought. He wasn't afraid. His abilities left him confident. He stood up and walked over, sitting down beside the fallen god. Thor had just finished a beer and was raising the bottle, hand cocked to smash it on the floor. Leon's reflexes were fast. Before the glass hit, he hooked it with his foot and guided it gently back onto the table. Even through his haze of sorrow, Thor noticed the Midgardian approaching. He looked up with a drawn, exhausted face and asked in a hollow voice, Midgardian, do you have anything for me? Leon's clever opening line died in his throat. He'd meant to ask a dozen things. Is this really Thor? Why does he look like this? But instead he opted for something casual. Hey, buddy, he said, forcing a smile. That cup belongs to the bar. It's not exactly polite to smash things like that. Thor answered without any energy. We do it that way where I'm from. Leon leaned forward, testing the waters. Where you're from? Asgard? Thor's expression brightened in an instant. You know Asgard? The brief spark faded almost as quickly. His shoulders slumped, and he said, defeated, It doesn't matter anymore. I've lost my divine power. Even Mjolnir has abandoned me. Abandoned? Leon couldn't hide his surprise. This was worse than he'd expected. He'd assumed the Thunder God might be searching for an heir or a champion. Not that he'd be pleading for help because his godhood had been stripped away. Trying to cut to the heart of it, Leon asked, "Are you Thor Odinson?" The light in Thor's eyes flared a little. "You know of me?" he asked, curiosity replacing the hollow tone for a moment. Leon gave a casual shrug. "Who doesn't know the famous Thor?" Thor let out a short, rueful laugh. "I didn't expect to meet someone on Midgard who knows my name," he admitted softly. Then, almost apologetically, he added, "But I'm afraid I'll disappoint you. Because I made a mistake. My father stripped me of my divine power and exiled me to the realm of mortals, Midgard, which you call Earth. I am no longer Thor. Another has taken up the name. Go find the person who wields Mjolnir. He is the new Thor." Hearing that, Leon understood. "I know who has Mjolnir," he said. "He's been looking for you. He believes you're the true Thor and wants to return the hammer to you. I believe that too." Thor's expression softened. He drew a breath and smiled. "I recognize his character. No wonder he could lift my hammer. I'll go find him now. You know him, right? Take me to him." With every word, Thor grew steadier, as if the doubt that had weighed him down was being swept away and the old confidence returned. Leon nodded and grinned. "That's more like the Thor I remember," he said, then walked over to the bar. "Hey," he told the bartender, "I'll cover the blonde, burly fellow's drinks." Daisy watched them go, chatting and laughing plainly, and let out a long breath. The lunatic had been taken away by the FBI. She was safe. Chapter 68. The 9 Realms in Thor's Eyes. "You are Thor?" Tony circled him once, twice, taking him in with a smirk. "You don't look like Thor. You look like a big oaf who's worked out too much and left his brains at home. Kid Leon, you didn't hire an actor to prank us, did you?" Thor bristled at the insult. "Little beard, what kind of talk is that? Come on, let's duel. Even without my divine power, I, Thor, can still string you up and beat you." He stepped forward, ready to lay Tony out. "Thor, calm down," Leon said, grabbing him by the arm. "You're here to get your hammer." Tony's armor gave a mechanical whir and a series of clanks. Thor froze as a new sound joined the chorus, heavy metal, somewhere close. He turned and looked up. A robot stood behind Tony, red and blue with streaks of lightning on its plating. It towered over Thor, so massive his head barely reached its knee. For a moment everything else dimmed, and a memory slid into focus. His mother telling him stories when he was a child, warning him about strange other kinds of beings. They were called Cybertronians. Not like the usual carbon-based life forms of the universe, she'd said. These were silicon-based, living machines. Thor stared up at the towering figure, realization and a flicker of old fear mixing across his face. He was looking at one of those legendary Cybertronians. Every Cybertronian wandering the universe was a weapon in its own right. Optimus Prime regarded Thor with calm authority. "I am Optimus Prime. Thor Odinson, your Asgardian people are famous across the stars, and you in particular, son of Odin." Thor threw back his head and gave a proud, foolish laugh. Leon, watching, rolled his eyes inwardly. "I was afraid I'd brought back an idiot," he thought. The laughter faded from Thor's face, replaced by a sudden gravity. He reached out as if feeling something in the air. "I am no longer Thor," he said softly. "I can feel the storm's power in your body. You must have lifted Mjolnir." Optimus inclined his head, then shook it slightly as if reluctant but honest. "Yes, I lifted your hammer, but its rightful master is not me. It is you, Thor Odinson." Thor's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Optimus Prime, you are a noble soul. Where is my hammer? I will fetch it and be Thor once more." At that moment, Agent Coulson stepped forward and offered a courteous bow. "Your Excellency, to keep it safe, our S-Shield has custody of your hammer. It's being held over there. If you'll come with me, I'll take you to it." Thor, unaware of any deception, believed him without hesitation. "You people are most kind," he said, following Coulson's lead. It wasn't that S-Shield wanted to protect Mjolnir so much as they couldn't move it. Worried someone might touch the hammer and set off who knows what, they built a secure research facility around the meteorite crater where it sat. Coulson led Thor down into that crater. The moment Thor saw Mjolnir, his whole body began to shake, not with cold but with excitement. "My hammer," he breathed. "I'm taking you home." He walked toward it as if pulled by a string. The hammer seemed to respond. The sky outside dimmed. A faint rumble of thunder rolled through the hangar. Tony couldn't help a dry, stunned thought. Nice environmental rendering. This thing would make an excellent movie prop. Could save a lot on special effects. Thor reached the hammer and wrapped his hand around the handle. He pulled with everything he had, shouted until his voice cracked, then sagged to his knees, looking up with a broken sound. No! Once again, the hammer had rejected him. The weapon that had been at his side for 1,000 years had abandoned him. The sky seemed to mirror Thor's mood. At first, a few tentative drops tapped the pavement, and within breaths, the drizzle had become a drenching downpour. "I'm such a fool," Thor muttered to himself, voice tight. "I knew Mjolnir," answered Optimus Prime, "and yet I still hoped the hammer would remember me, its former master." Leon leaned in, whispering, "Did someone knock sense into him too hard?" "Like his wife ran off with another man," he added, half to himself. Tony couldn't resist. "And the new guy doesn't even appreciate her." Their teasing drifted to Thor's ears. He stiffened, and the air around him seemed to sag, pressure dropping, rain falling harder. One of the team spoke up, more sober now. "We can confirm he is Thor. This storm is coming from him. When we lifted the hammer earlier, only Optimus Prime caused that reaction. Optimus took on Thor's power." Leon frowned. "What do we do with him? He doesn't look like he's going to get his divine powers back anytime soon." Tony's smile turned practical. "Then we keep him. He's a perfect source of intelligence on Asgard." "We'll house him," Coulson said before anyone else could. S.H.I.E.L.D. can provide accommodation, and we've got the manpower to handle it." With beings like those around, S.H.I.E.L.D. had no business meddling in Asgardian affairs, Thor had said. It would be difficult for them to get involved. He looked over at Coulson. "Okay, you find us a place to stay too." Damn it, Loki snarled, useless fury battering the high stone walls of the Great Hall. "Why can that Cybertronian lift Mjolnir, something even Thor can't budge, and I, the new king of Asgard, can't lift it either?" Mjolnir was more than a weapon, it was a symbol of kingship. Loki refused to accept anyone outside Odin, Thor, and himself having claim to it, even though, absurdly and infuriatingly, he could not lift it. He paced, his thoughts a whirl of humiliation and spite. If he couldn't possess the hammer, he could at least destroy the thing that had dared to touch it. He remembered the weapon hidden in the palace vault, Odin's armor, the Destroyer. Thinking of it made his pulse quicken. With the Destroyer, he could crush that Cybertronian. He could, he told himself, definitely destroy it. Loki strode for the vault. Odin had been put into the Odin's Leap, and in the interim, Loki had assumed the title of God King. That role gave him access to the treasures of the Heavenly Palace and to the Destroyer. "Thor, can you explain the whole World Tree concept again?" Tony asked, tapping his wristband and flicking a switch. "I'm recording." He wanted to save this valuable information. "Yes. If you want to hear it, I could talk all day." Thor grinned, then fell into a more serious tone and continued. "The World Tree is a unique structure in the cosmos that connects the 9 realms. It also manifests physically in each realm. The handle of my hammer, Mjolnir, was fashioned from a branch of that tree, which makes it excellent at conducting energy. There are many space-time rifts scattered throughout the 9 realms. Through some of them, people from Midgard can pass between worlds. Those rifts, however, shift constantly and are difficult to locate, so traveling between realms using them is generally impractical. That's why we use the Bifrost. It links to the World Tree's network, letting us move between the realms with ease. The 9 realms are Asgard, Vanaheim, home of the Vanir, Nidavellir, realm of the dwarves, Alfheim, home of the light elves, Jotunheim, land of the frost giants, Svartalfheim, home of the dark elves, Muspelheim, home of the fire giants, Helheim, the realm of the dead, and Midgard, your mortal world. We call it Middle-earth too, but my father warned me not to underestimate it. There are many powerful beings there, even if I've heard of none among you Midgardians. The 9 realms don't occupy the same space. Most inhabit separate dimensions. You can't reach Asgard by ordinary space travel. Chapter 69, The Destroyer Attacks. "You mentioned dimensional planes," Tony said. "I've heard that term, but it's just a hypothesis on Earth. Are you actually using it in Asgard?" Thor scratched his head. "You mean dimensional space. It's common knowledge here. What's so strange about it?" "All right, common knowledge," Tony replied. "Then explain this common knowledge to me in detail." As Tony listened, it finally dawned on him just how far ahead Asgardian technology was. He could now see why others reacted the way they did when he showed off his own advancements, though in his mind he wasn't showing off at all. Beep, 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 a shrill alarm cut him off. The bracelet on Tony's right wrist lit up and flashed. He started, then realized the sound came from the drones he'd stationed around the base. The warning meant something was approaching. Tony gave up trying to pry anything out of Thor about dimensional space. He tapped his bracelet a few times and asked, "Jarvis, what's going on outside?" Jarvis's voice answered from the bracelet, calm and measured. "Sir, the drone has detected a large metallic structure abruptly manifesting and moving toward the base." A hollow projection sprang out of the bracelet, filling the air between Tony and Thor with a live feed of the scene outside. Tony blinked at the image, still trying to make sense of it, when Thor's voice cut through in a single, startled exclamation. "The Destroyer! How did it appear on Midgard?" Tony frowned. Destroyer, was that an Asgardian thing looking for Thor? Thor's face had gone very serious. "The Destroyer is my father's armor," he said. "King Odin's. He has not used it in many years. In my memory, whenever it comes forth, it is for war." Tony's expression tightened. Odin sending a weapon to Earth like this was not a good sign. "Thor, what are its capabilities?" Before Thor could answer, the camera outside swung to show Coulson and his team in the courtyard. They had already spotted the massive figure looming near the base. But because of Tony Stark's reputation for new toys, Coulson jumped to the wrong conclusion. He grabbed a megaphone off a nearby table and bellowed up toward the hulking metal form. "Mr. Stark, if that's you, whatever you're testing, don't shoot." There was no response. The Destroyer made no human move to acknowledge the shout. Instead, the armor's helm tilted, as if listening to a distant command, and an otherworldly glow began to gather behind its visor. "It won't respond," Thor said quietly. "It is not Stark's iron. It answers only to Asgardian will." The ground trembled as the Destroyer took a slow step forward. The movement set up a low reverberation that rattled windows and sent loose papers skittering across the concrete. Coulson and the others instinctively dropped behind vehicles and equipment, weapons drawn. The courtyard emptied in seconds as people scrambled for cover. "Jarvis," Tony said, already moving his hand over the bracelet. "Analyze. Power signature. Is it sentient? Where's it being controlled from?" "Scanning," Jarvis replied. "Power output equivalent to a high-yield conventional warhead. No identifiable emission pattern consistent with a human operator. Source of command appears to be enchanted, Asgardian in origin. No conventional communication channel detected." "Lovely," Tony muttered. He glanced at Thor. "So it might be an autonomous construct, or it's being remotely driven by Odin or someone in Asgard." "If the king commands it, it will obey," Thor said. He looked, for an instant, like a soldier who remembers a battlefield. "If it has been sent, it was sent with purpose. We must be cautious." "Jarvis, prep the base defenses," Tony ordered. "Raise shields, bring up countermeasures, and call Fury." "Acknowledged. Deploying localized shield generators and hardening outer perimeter," Jarvis said. "Contacting Colonel Fury now." The Destroyer took another step, crushing a row of barricades underfoot. A sudden low hum swelled from the armor. The hum became a concentrated beam of energy. It lanced the air and struck the far wall of the base. Concrete exploded outward in a fountain of dust and debris. "Everyone down," Coulson snapped, pushing his team to safer cover. Thor stepped forward as if he could physically bar the way, hammer clenched. "Stand back," he warned. "This thing will not be negotiated with." Tony's mind raced through options. Suit up, engage from range, try to divert it, stall for time until reinforcements arrived. The Destroyer did not give him the courtesy of hesitation. Its visor flared, then fixed on the main entrance as if marking its target. "Jarvis," Tony said, voice flat with focus. "Priority 1, keep civilians safe. Priority 2, distract it long enough for Thor and I to figure out how to stop whatever sent it. And start the Mark XL7 if you have to. I don't care if it's still in bits in the lab, put it together." "As you wish, sir," Jarvis replied. Outside, the Destroyer's heavy steps continued, each impact a promise of escalation. The courtyard was a scuffle of dust and shouted orders. Coulson stared up at the implacable metal figure and then at the two men inside the base who could actually do something about it. Tony, he said into his megaphone, if that really is you, please, for the love of God, tell me you're not about to turn this into a war zone. Tony didn't answer because there was no time for theatrics. He already felt the familiar jolt of adrenaline that came before a fight. Thor raised his hammer, the muscles in his jaw working, and the two of them prepared to meet a piece of Asgard that had no business standing on Midgard, and certainly no business marching toward their people. Stark, if you need to store armor, you can bring it to our base. There's a dedicated spot, one of the agents called, trying for a friendly tone. The hulking suit didn't respond at all. It stood motionless, as if it hadn't heard a word. Coulson frowned. Stark didn't answer, he muttered, confused. Sir, I advise you to clear the area. It's about to attack, an officer warned. A lazy, amused voice came from behind Coulson before he could turn. He barely had time to register it when the destroyer's faceplate split open. Light and crackling energy gathered along its exposed features like a storm condensing into a point. Coulson's stomach dropped. He understood in an instant what was coming and lunged sideways. A blast seared the ground where he'd been standing. The impact left a smoking, jagged pit in the asphalt. For God's sake, this isn't Stark's armor. It's an enemy, Coulson snapped. Get Stark and Optimus Prime now. As he sprinted for a secure vantage, he thumbed a frantic message to Tony, calling for immediate backup. The agents returned fire, but their weapons were laughably ineffective. Their rounds bounced off the enemy armor as if it were stone. Sir, our attacks aren't penetrating its shell, one of them reported, voice tight. Then fall back to the base and bring heavy ordnance, Coulson ordered. Hold them off however you can until Stark and Optimus Prime arrive. He had to be practical. Whatever this thing was, it was built to shrug off standard small arms fire. The safest bet was to buy time and let the heavy hitters, two who could go toe-to-toe with something that size, take the lead. Who's looking for me? The voice came from above, unmistakably loud and cocky. Everybody looked up to see Iron Man streaking in, armor gleaming. Tony hovered a few meters off the ground, grinning beneath the visor. I have to say, Odin's armor is not as good-looking as mine, he called. He sounded absurdly proud. Thor told me that thing only really works when Odin himself wears it. Right now it's just a remote-controlled robot with limited attack power. I can handle it. He banked the suit closer to the destroyer and spoke up, faux formal. Odin, God King, yes, because you're ancient and all that, but it's rude to casually send a weapon to someone else's planet. I suggest you recall your destroyer. The destroyer didn't even look at him. It kept walking, slow and inexorable, toward the S-Shield base. Jarvis, was I ignored? Tony asked, affronted. It appears, sir, that you were, Jarvis replied. The full Jarvis Corps was currently at Stark Industries helping Pepper. The voice in Tony's helmet was a subordinate instance of the AI. Tony's jaw set. Fine, I'm going to reason with this armor. How dare it ignore me, Iron Man? He floated up a bit and shouted, half serious, half comic. Hey, you big lug, do you hear me? Or do you not use sound at all and only respond to electromagnetic waves? No, that's wrong. Thor can understand. Or are you some automated program that doesn't understand human speech? Tony jabbed, circling the hulking destroyer armor, his mouth a non-stop stream of commentary. Far away in the halls of the Heavenly Palace, Loki's brow twitched and a vein throbbed at his temple. He was at the spear, controlling the destroyer from across realms, and every word from Tony floated up to him like a buzzing insect. What a pest, he thought. Loki's fingers tightened on the eternal spear. Gungnir, Odin's spear, was the conduit he was using to command the armor, the very thing that had allowed him to seize the role of temporary God King. On Earth, the destroyer obeyed. Its metal hand clenched, and with a motion too fast for Tony and his suit to anticipate, it launched a punch aimed straight at the airborne Stark. Tony was still talking, confident that Jarvis would pick up whatever came and react in time. Then the blow hit. He slammed backwards through the air, skidding hundreds of meters before anything slowed him down. Only as he flew did Jarvis's warning finally cut through the chaos. Sir, watch out! The opponent is about to strike. Jarvis, your warning's too late. I'm already being flung back toward New York. Tony tumbled across the pavement a few times, then managed to wrest control of the armor, bleeding off the impact and coming to a stop. He stared at the suit, reduced to twisted scrap by a single blow from the destroyer, and let out a long, frustrated sigh. "Jarvis, drop whatever you're doing and send me the new armor. We'll take this destroyer down together." Seconds after he spoke, streams of data flowed from his bracelet and coalesced into Jarvis's holographic form. The projection shifted. A stored suit, the Mark VI, unlocked and slid free. Tony yanked off the ruined Mark V and started snapping himself into the Mark VI as fast as he could. "Sir," Jarvis warned, "the Mark VI has not been fully tested. There may be complications." Tony jabbed a finger at the shredded Mark V. "Jarvis, are you seriously suggesting I go back out there in this heap?" "Sir, I recommend you allow me to handle the engagement. It is overly hazardous for you to be exposed personally." "No, if I don't go in myself, what kind of Iron Man would I be?" At the base, Optimus Prime, resting in truck mode, suddenly sensed a disturbance. He shifted back into his Autobot form and turned toward the destroyer. "More Asgardians have arrived?" 70. Tony, who can perform body substitution. Optimus Prime sprang to his feet. "Bumblebee, hold the base," he said, glancing at the little Autobot. "I'm going to check the situation." With long, determined strides, Optimus ran out of the base toward the spot where the destroyer had appeared. With a metallic click and whir of gears, Bumblebee shifted back into Autobot mode and watched Optimus go, confusion writ across his face. Not long after Optimus left, Thor came charging in, breathless and anxious. "Where's Optimus Prime?" he demanded. "He left suddenly. I don't know why," Bumblebee answered. Thor began circling in restless frustration. "Can you take me there? It's urgent." Bumblebee shook his head. "Sorry, Thor. My orders are to guard the base. I can't leave." "If you bring me and come right back, it won't take long," Thor pressed. "No." Bumblebee's refusal left Thor visibly desperate. If this had been before, he would have simply swung his hammer and flown off, but now he couldn't. All he had was his own 2 feet. "Stubborn Cybertronian!" Thor panted as he ran across the desert, muttering complaints about Bumblebee under his breath. A familiar voice called from behind him. He glanced back to see Leon pulling up in a sleek car. "Son of Jones, you are my good brother from now on." Thor blurted, surprised. Leon winced a little at the odd title, but kept his grin. Thor climbed into the passenger seat and peered around with curiosity. "Leon, your car is amazing." Leon tapped a few buttons on the dash. The tires retracted and were replaced by 4 thrusters. As he tilted the wheel, the thrusters spat crimson fire and the car lifted off the sand. "This reminds me of Pegasus," Thor exclaimed. Leon laughed. "This isn't mine. It's Coulson's. The car's called Laura. Coulson adores it and hardly ever uses the flying function. He treats it like a treasure." Leon had heard Coulson gush about his beloved car countless times when they worked together. Leon had always wanted to try the flying mode, a car that could actually lift off the ground, something he'd only ever seen in sci-fi movies. Coulson, however, always refused. He warned Leon that using the flight systems would seriously damage Laura. Today, though, Leon found his chance. While Coulson was distracted, he climbed into Laura and took her out anyway. Coulson felt a flicker of irritation, but there was no time to argue. On the battlefield, he was more worried about Tony. He hadn't expected Iron Man, the man he regarded as their savior, to be pushed back so quickly by that armored monstrosity. Then Tony reappeared. "Jarvis, restrict its movements," Tony ordered. Tony and Jarvis moved in on the destroyer, one to its left and one to its right, then launched several oddly shaped missiles from behind. The projectiles struck the destroyer and detonated into a cloud of white mist. Ice spread across the machine's hull in moments, crackling and glossing over joints until its motions began to stiffen. "Big guy, so fast and you still can't dodge," Tony taunted over the suit comms, his voice crackling with triumph. Those freezing missiles weren't an improvisation. Tony had designed them specifically to deal with large enemies. They rapidly formed layers of ice to lock down servos and hydraulics, slowing movement and buying time. It was a product of his research into countermeasures against Cybertronians, and he'd had Jarvis make sure they were on hand for this fight. Jarvis's hull began to shift. With a low humming whine, a large barrel unfolded from his chest and started charging. He funneled over 60% of his power into that chamber and fired it through the conversion muzzle, an impact comparable to a Tomahawk missile. The ice encasing the destroyer started to splinter. Before the machine could fully break free, Jarvis's shot struck it and sent it careening backward. Boom! A cloud of dust and ice blasted into the air. Hostile neutralized. This so-called destroyer poses no threat, Jarvis reported. His torso retracted, and his optical sensors scanned the field, though something in the readings made him hesitate. "Sir, the destroyer has not been neutralized," Jarvis warned. Tony barely had time to register that when an enormous surge of energy erupted from the dust, hurling both him and Jarvis even farther back. Tony stared into the settling debris, breath catching in his throat. "What?" he breathed. As the dust settled, the destroyer stood at the center again, intact. After that brutal strike from Jarvis, the destroyer's armor still showed no visible damage. Jarvis corrected Tony immediately. "Sir, the destroyer did take damage from the previous attack, but it repaired itself almost instantly by an unknown mechanism. That's why it appears unharmed." Tony let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, but the relief was thin. The destroyer's defenses were absurd. That had been everything he and Jarvis could muster, yet it had left only hairline traces that were already knitting themselves back together. How were they supposed to beat something that healed as quickly as it took a hit? "Mortals, you have angered a god," a disdainful voice thundered from inside the destroyer. Loki, speaking through the suit. "It can talk? I thought it was mute," Tony shot back, sarcasm automatic even with his blood running cold. The destroyer's faceplate split open, and a molten, magma-like glow poured out of the machine's chest. Without warning, a sphere of energy, about the size of a basketball, slammed toward Tony. The shot was too fast to dodge. With no time to maneuver, Tony triggered a new defensive protocol in the Mark V6. With a burst of servos, segments of the suit tore free from Tony's body and slammed into the energy beam, taking the brunt of the hit. The recoil from the ejected plates snapped Tony and the remaining armor away from the blast. The pieces that had intercepted the beam vaporized instantly. There wasn't even a speck of dust left. "This maneuver is called Golden Cicada Shedding Its Shell," Tony announced, winded. The armor clinging to him was noticeably thinner and lighter. The protocol had been built for exactly this kind of situation. It was an automatic emergency routine. When the suit detected an unavoidable attack it couldn't otherwise block, it would jettison expendable parts to save Tony's life. Jarvis swept into Tony's side, reconfiguring again so its form enveloped him. "Sir, let us be one in mind." Tony couldn't help but snort. "Jarvis, that was embarrassingly dramatic. Sounds like a line from a Japanese cartoon. What do they call it? Chunibyo." "Sir," Jarvis replied, deadpan, "that's not animation. It's anime." "I've been looking into some Japanese works to get a better sense of what I am," Jarvis said. "Japan is very advanced in this area, sir. You might even find inspiration for armor design in Japanese anime." "I'm not a child," Tony snapped. Overhead, the fused form of Tony and Jarvis cut through the sky. The configuration Tony had christened the Mark VI Jarvis upgraded version. It was built for true synchronized combat with Jarvis. Ever since Jarvis had become a sentient, independent being, Tony had felt oddly reluctant to fight while wearing him. It felt like he was inside Jarvis's body, which technically he was, and Jarvis's avatar presented as male. Tony didn't much like the idea of inhabiting a male form. He glared at the suit and muttered, "What an ugly monster. A flashy second-stage transformation. That's what protagonists get, not this." 71. Optimus Prime arrives lately. The kid Leon kept whispering the word protagonist in Tony's ear until it stuck. Tony even found himself repeating a few dramatic lines. Whatever it was, the timing couldn't have been better. After fully integrating with Jarvis, the Iron Man armor's performance spiked across the board. Systems stabilized, and the energy Jarvis had burned earlier flowed back into the suit. "Target, ugly monster. Entering Stage 2, Jarvis announced. The armor's forearms reshaped, panels sliding and folding until a shield and a mace formed at Tony's hands. He surged forward and smashed the mace into the destroyer's faceplate. The impact rang out like a struck bell. Deep cracks spidered across the metal. Loki, from within the destroyer, snarled and ordered a counterattack. The giant raised an iron fist and brought it down. Thud. The destroyer's punch slammed into Tony's shield, but something strange happened. A chunk of the kinetic energy seemed to dissipate into nowhere. The force barely budged him. He stepped back only half a pace. Loki frowned. That punch should have sent Iron Man flying. The destroyer's strength, its near-impenetrable defense, and yet this suit had not only taken the hit, but had cracked his faceplate. This was not the result he expected. Tony grinned. Ugly machine. This shield's made of vibranium. Money well spent. He'd built a heavy dose of vibranium into the shield. Its ability to absorb kinetic energy massively improved his defense. That was why the destroyer hadn't sent him flying. The mace, by contrast, was pure adamantium, practically indestructible. Even for a big spender like Tony Jarvis, the price paid for those two pieces made his chest tighten. That black-hearted merchant, Amon actually sold them to me at twice the market price. There was no other way to get that much rare metal. Without Amon's channels, collecting equivalent quantities would have taken forever. Mortal, you are too arrogant. The power of a god is beyond your imagination. Loki's irritated voice echoed from inside the destroyer, and without any wind-up, the construct unleashed a searing blast of energy. Tony was ready this time. He wouldn't get hit twice, and he slid out of the beam's path with a quick sidestep. Ugly monster, that same trick won't work on me, Tony crowed. 2.5 minutes later, the destroyer launched him like a rag doll. The suit slammed along the ground and rolled for dozens of meters before finally skidding to a stop. The faceplate of the armor opened, revealing Tony's ashen face. He hacked up a mouthful of blood. The vibranium-infused shield in his hand was warped and dented. Shit, Tony thought. I should have put vibranium in the whole suit, but the stuff's ridiculous. Fine. A vibranium chestplate'll have to do. Jarvis, are you all right? He asked. Jarvis's voice came back, thinner than usual. Sir, I'm functional. I just need a moment to recover. Recommend we withdraw. Jarvis nudged the armor into the air. Just as they began to accelerate away, the destroyer shot out a hand and seized Tony's leg. Through the mechanical voice came Loki's smooth, cruel tone. Mortal, you anger a god and think you can run? Tony's smile stiffened for a beat. Then he turned back and let a crooked grin come through. Heh, maybe our customs are different. On Earth, when our clothes tear, we put on new ones. I'm going to change now. Loki laughed. In Asgard, a dented cuirass is a badge of honor. We do not swap it out. At that, Jarvis, the AI voice that had been trapped in the destroyer's grip, began to unravel into filaments of light and data. The stream slipped from the metal hand like smoke and with a soft pop vanished. Only a lone mobile phone remained clasped in the destroyer's palm. Ha! Perfect. I knew Jarvis would dematerialize and bug out. Tony's voice crackled over the comms. Come on, you ugly tin god. What are you waiting for? It was a deliberate ruse. Datification takes time, and moving an AI off the destroyer required a carrier. The taunt had been Mem, and to hold the machine's attention long enough for the transfer to complete. Loki swore under his breath, more mortified than angry. He, the god of mischief, had been outfoxed by a human. The destroyer redirected its cold, expressionless gaze toward the cluster of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents at the edge of the field. Agent Coulson, having already ordered the withdrawal, shepherded his team back without hesitation. He had watched the exchange and knew as plainly as anyone that Tony's human body stood no chance against a living war construct. Curiosity was a luxury he couldn't afford. Coulson led the team back toward the base, praying they'd find whatever agents were still inside to help them. None of them had brought heavy weapons for the investigation. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of boots behind them kept growing. They ran like their lives depended on it, because they did. Coulson risked a glance over his shoulder and felt the heat in his chest drop to ice. Iron Man, who should still have been buying them time against the destroyer, was gone. The metal Colossus was closing the distance fast. Where was Tony Stark? Was he dead? The worst-case scenarios flashed through Coulson's head as the noise behind them swelled into a roar. He could feel the destroyer's weight in the air. Of all the stupid things now seemed obvious in hindsight, he should have listened to Leon and asked the director for time off. He should have been at Audrey's cello recital instead of leading a ragged band of unarmed agents into a fight. The thought of missing her performance made him ache in a way that had nothing to do with the pounding in his chest. His life ran through him in a rush. Coulson tightened his grip on the little service pistol, wheeled around, and squeezed off shot after shot at the oncoming destroyer. Clink! 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 The bullets rang harmlessly off the armored hide. He closed his eyes, braced for the end. Then, a horn blared, followed by the crunch of metal. Coulson's eyes snapped open just in time to see a huge red and blue truck slam into the destroyer at breakneck speed, sending the armored figure tumbling through the air. Metal screeched and dust exploded. The truck unfolded into robot form, Optimus Prime, and for a heartbeat, everything went quiet. Phil Coulson, Optimus intoned, "Your spark burns with the light of courage." Coulson let out a ragged laugh of relief. "Phew, I thought that was it." He sagged to his knees, nearly collapsing as exhaustion washed over him. Optimus shifted his weight, returning to full Autobot stance, and turned his attention to the destroyer as it struggled to its feet. The armor was unmistakable, Asgard's destroyer, but something was wrong. "You wear the destroyer armor," Optimus said, studying it, "but you are not Odin. Odin's control would not allow you to be thrown like that. Who are you?" When Optimus Prime said it, Loki, towering in his frost giant form, felt a sudden heat flare in his chest. He snorted, a cloud of icy breath curling from his lips. "Humph, lowly Cybertronian," he spat. "Odin doesn't need to get involved to deal with you." Loki shoved his will into the destroyer. The ancient armor obeyed, roaring to life as it unleashed a concentrated energy blast. The beam cut the air toward Optimus, but it meant little to a warrior of his experience. With a fluid, almost mechanical twist, a practiced cyberbend, Optimus slipped out of the blast's path. He closed the distance in 2 strides, ignited his energy sword, and swung it in a single, brutal arc at the destroyer. Farther back, Leon and Thor were racing toward the fight with Laura in the car. The sudden flare of light from the clash slammed into their eyes. Both of them swore at once. "Fuck!" 72. Unlucky Thor. Before Thor could even register what was happening, Leon grabbed him and activated his ability. World Harmony. Leon had never used it like this. Since acquiring the power, he'd only ever used it for convenience or to show off. He'd never needed it in a life-or-death moment, until now. A deafening blast split the air. The destroyer's energy beam slammed into Laura and the car around her, tearing them apart in an instant. The world went white-hot and then black with smoke. "Cough, cough, cough!" Leon and Thor crawled out of the wreckage, coughing and choking on dust and ash. Their clothes were ruined and streaked with grime, but neither of them was seriously hurt. Thor stared around, still bewildered. He hadn't even had time to figure out what was happening before the explosion. "By Odin," he breathed, awe and relief warring in his voice. "We're lucky. We're not even hurt. Just filthy." Since losing his powers, Thor had been painfully aware of how fragile the mortal body was. Surviving an explosion like that without a scratch felt almost miraculous. Leon, however, didn't share his enthusiasm. He sagged against a charred chunk of metal, sweat pouring down his face. "Lucky?" he rasped. "I don't know about lucky. I'm about to collapse." He'd unleashed World Harmony at full power to shield them from the destroyer's blast. The price was immediate. Energy drained from him like water through a sieve. His limbs felt heavy and his vision swam. Thor knelt beside him, alarm replacing relief. "What's wrong?" "You look so weak," Thor blurted, surprised. Leon's expression darkened. He was about to snap back when a jagged shard of metal whistled past and slammed into Thor's abdomen. "Oh, my kidney." Thor clutched at the wound and let out a raw, pained howl. Leon's eyelid twitched. He spoke, half helpless, half embarrassed. "Thor, it wasn't your father's protection that saved us. I siphoned off your luck, took enough of it to tilt the odds so we didn't get blown to pieces in the explosion. But that means you're going to be unlucky for a while." "Unlucky?" Thor frowned, confused. Leon rubbed his temple. "Not catastrophically, more like petty misfortunes. Stuff like getting hit by stray debris, tripping, things like that. So you need to be careful. Don't." He never finished. A rock, flying from who knew where, struck Thor on the head and knocked him out cold. "That's a good start," Leon muttered wryly. He took a couple of steadying breaths, then hauled Thor up by the collar and dragged him away from the ongoing battle between Optimus Prime and the Destroyer. Even if each individual mishap wouldn't kill Thor, Leon didn't trust luck alone to keep him safe if they stayed in the crossfire. Small wounds piling up into something fatal, Thor could bleed out. If Thor died here, Leon would be in deep trouble. He heaved the unconscious god across his shoulders and started to drag him. Then his watch, his left wrist, flickered to life for no reason. Streams of data scrolled across the face. Jarvis shimmered into being, and with a soft mechanical whir, a human outline resolved out of nowhere. The watch's casing opened like a hatch, and Tony Stark stepped out. Leon's eyes went wide. "Tony Stark? How did you just appear out of thin air?" Tony's face was a little pale, but he couldn't resist a quip. "Kid, you're not worldly enough. This is Stark tech, information transmission." Leon's mouth twitched. He couldn't stand Tony's perpetual smugness. Pouting, he said, "You're not here just to show off, are you? Something wrong?" Tony's grin faded. He went serious in an instant. "Don't you always brag you can mess with luck? Take this. Use it to steal the injuries." He snapped the left-hand armor free, exposing his wrist, then removed the small device, the spark gauntlet, and handed it to Leon. Leon stared as if he'd been handed an alien artifact, utterly baffled, like an elderly person trying to figure out a smartphone. He understood each word Tony said, but strung together, they made no sense. What did steal the injuries even mean? Seeing the blank look on Leon's face, Tony tried again. "I know it sounds weird. Just put on the spark gauntlet, use your luck ability, think about stealing my injuries, then twist your wrist. That's it. I'll explain why afterwards." Leon eyed him suspiciously. "All right, I'll try." He slid the spark gauntlet onto his left hand and, doing as Tony instructed, focused on the idea of taking the injuries. He concentrated on his luck power and gave his wrist a single twist. He didn't activate world harmony. Tony had told him that wasn't necessary. Tony hadn't expected success on the first go. He'd practiced this move with Ratchet before, and directly stealing injuries was tricky, only worked about once every 7 or 8 tries. Then Tony suddenly inhaled, a surprised smile breaking across his face. He felt lighter. The wounds from the fight with the Destroyer were gone, as if they'd never happened. "You're pretty damn good, kid," Tony said, grinning. "You pulled it off on the first try. It usually takes at least 7 or 8 attempts." Leon stared at his hand, baffled. He'd only twisted his wrist. What had he actually done? How had Tony gotten so flushed? His wounds had just vanished, and he felt a rush of relief. He turned the spark gauntlet back into a watch and snapped it onto his wrist. Then he glanced down at Thor, lying unconscious on the ground. "Okay, what happened? Why is Thor out cold?" he asked. Leon scratched his head, sheepish. Just bad luck. He must have been hit in the distant battle." At that moment, a broken tire came flying from farther off and smacked Thor right on the chest. Thor's eyes popped open for a beat, then he slid back into unconsciousness. As Guardians are tough, this was nothing life-threatening, just a nasty bruise. "See? Just his luck," Leon insisted. Tony's eyes widened as the realization settled in. "You didn't do this on purpose, did you? This isn't just bad luck. Thor's lying there doing nothing and things keep hitting him." "Relax, it was an accident. Let's get him somewhere safer. This place is too dangerous," Leon said. Bang! Another unidentified object streaked toward them, but Jarvis detected it in time and knocked it aside before it could hit anyone. Tony felt his mouth twitch involuntarily. The bad luck this kid drew in was getting ridiculous. He forced himself to calm down, stepped over to Thor, and wrenched the metal shard out of the god's side. He unsnapped a small canister from his suit and sprayed the wound. The mist hardened almost instantly, knitting into a spiderweb-like film that sealed the cut. "I'll leave it like that for now," Tony said. "I'll get him somewhere safe." He scooped Thor up, engaged his boot thrusters, and they lifted off. Then, with a sudden, ugly thump, Thor dropped out of the sky and slammed into the ground. This time he came to immediately, keening, "By Odin, is an enemy attacking me?" Tony flew back, holding a ragged scrap of Thor's garment between 2 fingers, and managed an awkward grin. "Not exactly enemy-grade tailoring," he muttered. "Your clothes are really poor quality." Everyone's attention snapped toward the base. Something was streaking in overhead. "Mjolnir," someone gasped. It must have recognized him again. Thor, bloodied and bewildered, was the first to react. He reached for his hammer, but only felt a blast of air as it whipped past. His expression went suddenly blank. "It's heading that way," he said quietly, pointing, "toward Optimus Prime." "Is he going to use Mjolnir to fight?" Tony watched the ruin-strewn skyline, brows drawn together behind the visor, Smoke and sparks painted long streaks across the afternoon. Somewhere below, metal screamed on metal. He knew Optimus Prime had arrived after him. The Autobot's massive silhouette had cut into the fray not long ago, and now the two Titans were locked against the destroyer. It was almost funny, in a way. A legendary Norse hammer, a sentient truck from another world, and a hulking Asgardian construct tearing up the city between them. Tony ran through the possibilities the way he ran diagnostics, fast, cynical, and obsessively thorough. Mjolnir's enchantment had always been the wild card. It answered to worthiness, not strength, and Tony didn't know whether that applied to non-human intelligences. Could an alloyed mind like Optimus be worthy? Would the hammer respond to circuitry and conviction, or did Thor's magic require a beating human heart? He pulled back a little higher to get a better view. Optimus wasn't wasting time on hypotheticals. He moved like he always did. Deliberate, authoritative, every strike aimed to end the fight cleanly. If the hammer came into play, Tony figured it would be either a terrible complication or the neatest solution he'd ever seen. For now, though, all he could do was watch and wait, suit systems humming, fingers already hovering over the controls in case the answer to, is he going to use Mjolnir, needed a fast, ironclad backup plan. Time snapped back to the instant Leon and Thor were struck down by the destroyer's beam. Optimus Prime was in the thick of it. The destroyer swung a brutal blow that slammed into his chest. Using the momentum, Optimus drove a kick that sent the armored Titan skidding several meters away. His lightsaber was already battered, its blade nicked and unstable, and it made no impression on the destroyer's hulking hide. Other weapons probably wouldn't work either, he thought. The destroyer was supposedly forged from Uru, the metal of the gods, made by Odin himself and nearly impervious to ordinary assaults. I've already pinged Ratchet, he reminded himself. I just need to hold it a little longer until Ironhide and Peely Huo get here. Together, we can take this Odin armor down. The wound in his chest was knitting closed, even as the pain flared. As long as a spark remained, a Cybertronian could mend itself. Leaders, sparks tended to recover faster, and his systems were already rerouting power to accelerate repairs. Mjolnir, Mjolnir, Mjolnir. A thin, otherworldly voice threaded through his processors, whispering a single name. The word echoed in Optimus's auditory receptors like a memory or a summons, faint and impossible in the chaos of battle. Optimus Prime snapped to attention and swept his optics across the clearing. Apart from the looming destroyer suit a short distance away, there was no one else. He thought, who spoke? And Mjolnir. He raised his right arm and made a grabbing motion through the air. Faint blue arcs of lightning danced along his chassis, as if answering the gesture. Inside the destroyer, Loki watched in bewilderment. He assumed the Cybertronian was trying some trick and dared not advance recklessly. Yet from their brief exchange, he had already realized this was no ordinary wanderer. The being before him was extraordinarily powerful, nothing like the nomadic Cybertronians he'd encountered across the cosmos. Even piloting the destroyer, Loki found he could not easily fell him. A sudden whoosh cut through the air. Loki felt it before he saw it. A disturbance, a familiar presence hurtling in. He looked up just in time to see a hammer streaking toward them. Mjolnir slammed into the destroyer's lantern-like helm with a thunderous impact, toppling the suit to the ground. Damn it, it's Mjolnir. He can actually wield Mjolnir, Loki snarled, furious and impotent. Loki had coveted Mjolnir his whole life. Now it rested in the hands of a Cybertronian, a being he considered inferior. Jealousy and fury flared inside him. Without thinking, he ordered the destroyer to unleash its ultimate attack. You lowly Cybertronian, you are not worthy to wield Mjolnir, he hissed. The destroyer's lantern-like head split open and began to charge. A searing column of light built up and then lashed outward toward Optimus Prime. Had this been the Optimus of old, he would have relied on decades of combat instinct to stride aside before the blast and strike during the weapon's cooldown. But now, with Mjolnir in his hand, he chose a different tactic. Optimus drew his right arm back, Mjolnir crackling in his grasp. Electric arcs raced across his chassis as he pivoted with the precise, brutal elegance of a war machine. In one fluid motion, he hurled the hammer straight into the path of the beam. The hammer met the energy blast. Electric light and white-hot fire tearing into each other, and the collision detonated in a violent explosion. Heat and sparks roared outward, smoke and debris filled the air. Loki's eyes burned as the blast washed over him, and his vision went white with the flash. When the smoke cleared, Mjolnir smashed into the destroyer armor and sent the hulking suit tumbling through the air. The hammer rebounded, and Optimus Prime, red and blue, crackling with electricity, burst from the dust cloud and snatched it out of the sky. He raised Mjolnir high. The heavens darkened and thick, silvery lightning poured down into the hammer. With a single devastating strike, Optimus drove the electrified hammer into the flying destroyer. Thunder and raw destructive force tore the armor apart in a blinding explosion. When the light faded, there was only a vast crater and Mjolnir, still flickering with lightning. Not a single shard of the destroyer remained. "Where did it go?" Optimus muttered. "Even if it was shattered, there should be fragments." He scanned the area and found nothing, and reluctantly concluded that someone from the Heavenly Palace must have recovered it. He told Ratchet not to call Ironhide or the others for backup. As he turned, Tony and Leon came rushing up the field, followed by S.H.I.E.L.D. agents carrying an injured Thor. After the skirmish with the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Leon siphoned off some of their luck and poured it into Thor, giving the god the break he needed to get out of a tight spot. Tony flew up and parked himself between the others and Optimus Prime. "Optimus Prime," he called, wary, "where's the destroyer?" Optimus reached down into the crater and hauled Mjolnir up out of the rubble before answering. "It's gone," he said. "Someone, probably from the Heavenly Palace, took it." "You two did all this?" Tony spread his hands in disbelief. "Unbelievable. You're not even human." He clicked his tongue and surveyed the wreckage with a mix of awe and irritation. Thor, meanwhile, couldn't take his eyes off Mjolnir and Optimus's massive hand. He tilted his head every time the hammer moved, watching it with a comical, almost puppy-like intensity. Optimus went quiet for a moment, replaying the battle in his mind, then spoke with a gravity that cut through the levity. "The one controlling the destroyer was not Odin. If it had been Odin, I wouldn't have been able to defeat the destroyer even with Mjolnir. Whoever was piloting it was openly hostile toward me, and furious that I used the hammer." "I think something's wrong with Odin," Tony said, rubbing his chin. "Someone who wants the throne is after Mjolnir. That's probably why the destroyer was sent to Earth." "That would explain it," Optimus Prime replied. "I didn't think the being we met was Odin either. It was too crude. But if some pretender is moving against us, this could get worse. Let's get Thor back to the base, patch him up, and question him while we can." Agreed. They started to leave, but before the team could get far, a figure slipped out of a shadow and into the open. Loki stood there in a dark green leather battlesuit and his horned helmet, the eternal spear clutched in one hand. He didn't pause to greet anyone. He immediately began searching, prodding at the ground and even gashing into the earth with his spear. After a frantic few minutes, he threw up his hands and shouted, exasperation raw in his voice. "Where's the destroyer? Where's my destroyer? It was right here!" Loki had come to Earth to reclaim the destroyer armor. During the fight with Optimus Prime, it had been struck by a destructive thunderbolt, and the blow had broken Loki's control over it. Now, having found nothing where he expected, Loki was furious and unsettled. Loki slammed the eternal spear into the ground and stood there, puzzling over the missing destroyer. It couldn't have been the mortals. He had been watching them a moment ago. They never had the chance. Could the Midgard sorcerers be responsible? Mother had told him that Midgard housed a circle of space magic adepts, but they had no reason to steal the destroyer. And besides, who among them would dare? This artifact came from the Heavenly Palace. He ran through possibilities in silence, weighing each one until none felt likely. Then a teasing voice cut through the stillness from behind him. "Little Bambi, are you looking for the golden destroyer, the silver destroyer, or this old broken one?" Loki startled. Someone had appeared without a sound. He turned slowly, eyes fixed on the direction of the voice. A man in a pointed felt hat and a flowing, old-fashioned magician's robe smiled at Loki. It was Amon in his classic guise. He adjusted his monocle and with a soft chuckle addressed Loki. "Third Princess, have you decided which destroyer will be yours?" With a lazy wave of his hand, Amon made 3 different destroyers rise and hover before Loki. They bobbed and drifted, as if trying to entice him. For an instant, Loki's reflex was to claim them all. He even felt an odd warmth, as though the man in front of him were being generous, offering him 2 extra destroyers. Just as Loki reached out toward one of the floating weapons, something clicked. He froze, shook his head violently, and took several hurried steps back, horror rising in his throat. "They're not mine," he blurted. His mouth was dry, his whole body taut. That charming stranger was dangerous. Whatever Amon had done a moment ago had seeped into his will, softening his guard and manufacturing the illusion that Amon meant well. Worse, and the thought that really made his heart pound, was that Amon had already taken his destroyer. "Not bad. Your will is stronger than I expected," Amon said, and with a casual wave, the 3 destroyers evaporated into nothing. He snapped his fingers. A small round table and 2 chairs shimmered into being beneath a wide parasol, as if they'd been transplanted straight from a seaside cafe. Amon gestured to the chair on Loki's side with an easy, almost hospitable smile. "Sit. Don't be shy. Make yourself at home." Loki's mouth twitched. He forced a smile and stepped back. I just remembered I have things to do at home. I'll go, now. Heimdall, teleport me back." He waited. No response came. He called again, sharper this time. "Heimdall, hurry up, Heimdall." Amon's expression was blandly amused. "Calling the guardian of the Bifrost. I suppose you're a bit too far apart. The signal must be weak." The words landed like a slap. Loki's face tightened. "You're behind this. You cut off my connection to Heimdall." Heimdall could see and hear everything that crossed the realms. Loki had never had his link severed in all the centuries. The realization stung. "Sit," Amon repeated, this time a firm gesture toward the chair. Amon laughed and waved the matter off. "Ha! Don't worry about it. It's nothing important," he said, settling back with an easy smile. "I'm not a bad person, you know." Loki gave a quick, skeptical nod. Amon noticed and grinned. "Still wary of me, are you? How troublesome." He pinched his monocle, paused for a heartbeat, then reached into the air as if into a pocket of nothing. From that empty space, he pulled out an object that made Loki's mouth fall open. "Mjolnir," Loki blurted. It really was Mjolnir. The hammer Amon had, rather brazenly, filched from Optimus Prime without anyone noticing. Loki was stunned not only that Amon could produce it from thin air, but that the other man could lift it without effort. "How did you do that?" Loki demanded. Amon tossed the hammer in one hand with a lazy flourish. "Because I'm a good person, obviously," he replied, then set it down on the table between them and smiled. "Try it." Loki wrapped his fingers around the handle and pulled with everything he had. Nothing. Mjolnir did not budge. It has to be true. Loki's mind raced. The other man hadn't lifted Mjolnir because he was worthy. He'd done it by sheer force, not brute physical strength. That wouldn't have mattered. Mjolnir was forged from a decaying neutron star. No one could hoist it by muscle alone. To override the enchantment Odin placed on the hammer and pick it up, the stranger's power had to be on a level at least comparable to Odin's. The implication was horrifying. Loki sank back down, stunned. "What do you want?" he asked at last. Amon smiled. "Loki, I hear you're the god of mischief and love a good prank. That suits me. I'll give you a chance. How about becoming my vassal?" Loki barked out a laugh. "My vassal? Do you have any idea who I am? Odin's second son, the Prince of Asgard, the god of lies and mischief, the greatest sorcerer in the 9 realms, and now the God King. You really expect me to be your vassal?" Amon shrugged, unimpressed. "All talk. Greatest sorcerer of the 9 realms? More like a sorcerer who's all show and no substance. A bulky spell slinger. Your mother's a better candidate than you. The one who gave you that title must be a frog in a well. Does he even know there's a sorcerer supreme on Earth? And do you honestly think you become a god king just by holding a stick?" The stick Amon meant was the eternal spear, Gungnir, its shaft said to be hewn from the trunk of the world tree. Loki's face hardened. If he hadn't judged the odds so unfavorably, he would have struck already. The man in front of him was all mockery. "Oh, did I bruise your pride?" Amon drawled. "Those titles are thin. At least God of Lies and Mischief sounds decent." Loki forced out a tight smile. "Thanks for the compliment. You're welcome. Just calling it like I see it." Seeing Loki on the verge of cracking, Amon stopped needling him. To make the fish bite, you need bait. he shifted tone and offered terms. I can make it so you truly lift Mjolnir. Loki blinked, confused. Huh? Amon took his time, letting the words land before he continued. You know better than anyone how you came to be called God King. Odin's leap will end, and your dream of becoming God King will end with it. Even if you tried to claim the throne lawfully, it's impossible. Thor's exile is nothing but a trial. When he regains his divinity, he'll still be the rightful heir to the God King. You'll always be merely a prince, but I can give you the capital to make yourself God King. The price is simply that you become my retainer. Do well by me, and I could even elevate you to serve as one of my angels. How would you do that? Loki asked, the question carrying an unspoken yes. The man across from him was plainly powerful. Refusal could mean never leaving. Becoming someone's retainer wasn't a dire cost. Once he escaped back to the heavenly palace, there were countless ways to rid himself of a patron. Loki preferred bargains with no downside and clear upside. It's very simple, just don't move. Amon rose. The table between them dissolved without a sound. He closed the distance until he was only a few dozen centimeters away, then clasped his palms together and, very slowly, drew them apart. Tiny, dreamlike lights twinkled between Amon's palms, like a handful of stars or the whole universe compressed into a fist. Then he opened his arms suddenly. The lights swelled and rushed outward, spilling over the room, until Loki felt as if he were floating inside the cosmos itself. Amon's voice, slightly teasing, cut through the awe. It might hurt a little afterward. Just bear with it. Loki was about to ask a question when the lights turned toward him, converging on his body. As they drew nearer, the pinpricks of starlight shifted and reshaped, changing from scattered points into strange, intricate symbols that crawled and rearranged themselves in the air. Chapter 75. Become a True God King. Symbols began to appear around Loki. Some bloomed like nested bubbles, others like abstract doors, stacked in chaotic, impossible arrangements. Still more were made of countless crystalline insects, their bodies entwined to form shifting, intricate patterns. They were beautiful in a way that made the skin prickle. How strange, Loki murmured, curiosity edging toward obsession. Why are they moving toward me? The fascination turned to alarm. The symbols weren't just hovering, they were advancing. Before he could think to step back, a white-hot pain lanced through him, rooting itself in his flesh and then crawling deeper into his bones and his soul. Loki sank to his knees. Beneath his skin something writhed, as if innumerable creatures scrambled for escape. He clawed at his arms and chest with frantic hands, nails tearing at flesh to get to whatever was slithering beneath, but his fingers met only slick, yielding skin. A thin, transparent bead of motion burst free where his nails had torn. Then another. Hundreds of translucent insectile shapes squeezed through the rents in his skin and spilled into the air, shimmering like living glass. They swarmed outward as if released from a spell, trying desperately to pull themselves away from him and back toward Amon. Loki's scream hung in that changing air, and the world answered. The space around him convulsed, light bent and fractured, surfaces rippled as if reality itself had been set on a trembling sheet. The bizarre symbols drew nearer still, and the newly freed insects rose to join them, a glinting, writhing tide seeking its origin. The first thing Loki noticed was how the life around them unraveled. Desert animals collapsed for no apparent reason, then rose from their carcasses as eerily twisted monsters. Nearby objects blinked out one by one, as if an invisible thief had plucked them away. Then Loki himself began to glitch. His form flickered and dissolved, reappearing in random places. The only constant was that every time he rematerialized, Amon was inexplicably at his side. Oh dear, Amon said, sounding mildly amused. It seems the bestowing method needs refinement. There are serious flaws. Adjusting his monocle, Amon examined the strange distortions rippling across Loki's body. He snapped his fingers. Immediately, the abnormalities smoothed away. Loki's stooped shoulders loosened, and he slid to the ground, staring blankly into the distance as if his soul had been hollowed out. Amon glanced around. They were no longer in the Mexican desert at all. The air smelled cold and thin, and the landscape was unmistakably Norwegian. Snow-capped pines rose around them, and a distant coastline glittered like ice. So this is the place you care about, Amon observed with a small smile. He stamped his foot lightly, and the world snapped once more. In an instant, they were back in the Mexican desert. The sudden shift in scenery steadied Loki. His eyes cleared a little, and he looked at Amon with faint recognition. He managed to prop himself up, trembling. "What did you do to me?" Amon didn't hurry to answer. He glanced at the rampaging monsters surrounding them, snapped his fingers, and the creatures froze, their life leaving them. Their bodies crumbled and blew away on the wind. Loki's pupils narrowed. He didn't understand what had just happened. "Of course I gave you power," Amon said. "You were far too weak on your own." He reached out as if to help Loki to his feet. "No need. I can stand." Loki refused the hand. Thanks to his frost giant blood, he had already recovered. Amon shook his head. "It seems my chosen one isn't very grateful." Loki forced his expression into something like resignation and replied, as if annoyed at being dragged into this, "What exactly do you want from me? I don't suppose you helped me just because you like me." "Here, take this." Amon handed him a small booklet, its cover marked with religious symbols. Loki opened it, the Gospel of Mysteries. "As my chosen, your long-term mission is clear," Amon said. "You will spread my teachings." "You're to secure your position as God King," the stranger said. "You already have the authority to lift Mjolnir. No one, not Odin, not anyone, will notice anything wrong. With your abilities, this should be easy. After you take the throne, spread my name through every world under Asgard's rule. I give you 6 months. I want the faith of those worlds. Do you understand?" "This isn't difficult," Loki replied without thinking. Becoming God King solved everything in his mind. The rest would fall into place. He flipped through the small booklet Amon had handed him, lips twitching with disbelief. The pages were full of grand claims that Amon was an awakened, ancient existence, but Loki had lived more than 1,000 years and had never heard of anything called the mysteries in the 9 realms. Names listed as authorities, Destiny Beacon, King of Spacetime, and the like, were strangers to him as well. Either the pamphlet was a fabrication, or the being before him was a newly arisen cosmic deity. Otherwise, Loki could not explain his ignorance. He looked up and asked, composed and curious, "What should I call you?" "Is it Lord of the Mysteries, or Celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings, or something else?" Loki asked. Amon considered for a moment, then a grin crossed his face. "You can call me Fool." "Huh?" Loki blinked. The title came out of nowhere. Amon laughed. "I'm joking. I won't hold it against anyone who calls me that. Choose anything from my honorifics or my authority. Personally, I prefer Lord of the Mysteries." Loki swallowed and took a breath. "How do I contact you, Lord of the Mysteries?" Amon produced a crystal monocle and handed it to him, smiling. "Say my honorific and I'll sense it. If you want something more theatrical, put this on. But remember, it's for your right eye." Loki turned the monocle over in his fingers. The crystal was finely cut, cold and perfect. He felt a prickle of unease at the thought of putting it on, as if something irreversible might happen. "I understand," he said softly. Amon seemed to read the hesitation and nodded without comment. He lifted Mjolnir from where it had been resting and passed the hammer into Loki's hand. "Try it," he said. Loki reached out, hesitant. He could already feel new energies humming at his edges, a collection of abilities he hadn't yet tested. Now, holding the hammer and the monocle, he was about to find out what any of them could actually do. Maybe he really could lift Mjolnir. The moment Loki closed his hand around the hammer's handle, Amon released it. Loki had braced himself for the familiar crushing weight, but the hammer in his grip felt almost weightless, as easy to hold as a small dagger. "It actually works," Loki whispered, stunned. He had coveted this hammer for centuries. At last, his dream had come true. Joy bubbled up uncontrollably. He had never felt so happy. Mjolnir seemed to respond to its new master's mood. Arcs of electricity danced along its surface, throwing a crackling mantle of light over Loki. "Thank you, great Lord of the Mysteries," he said, the words the most sincere he had ever spoken. Amon inclined his head. "Now the highest authority over the hammer is yours. Use it well. Cultivate the power I have given you. They will serve you far more than you imagine." "I will not fail you," Loki answered. "I await your good news," Amon replied, and then his figure faded quietly from sight. Loki stared at the empty air where Amon had stood and murmured to himself, "I still can't detect how he did it. He's even stronger than I thought." The thought flitted through Loki's mind as he stared at the hammer in his hand. The shadow of melancholy that had sat on his chest loosened and faded. He flexed his fingers, testing the new power he'd just claimed. Starlight gathered at his fingertips, coalescing into a shimmering doorway, a door made entirely of light. Without hesitation, he stepped through. He emerged in Asgard. At the far end of the Bifrost Bridge stood the Bifrost Palace, a circular golden hall where Heimdall kept his vigil. The ever-watchful sentry rested his hands on Hofund, the longsword that was both the key to the Bifrost and a fearsome divine artifact in its own right. Something in the hall alerted Heimdall. He turned, and his gaze met Loki's. The trickster's arrival was like a flare, radiant and impossible to ignore. 76. Lost Mjolnir, Heimdall frowned. Loki, how did you get back? He had personally sent Loki to Midgard, and now the trickster stood in the halls of the palace without Heimdall having any idea he'd returned. The question hung between them. Loki's expression went cold. Mind your place, Heimdall. I am the God King now. He drove the eternal spear into the gilded floor with a heavy tap and set a familiar hammer in plain view with his left hand. Heimdall bowed, forced and reluctant. He had always been loyal to Odin. In his heart, he still thought Thor the more fitting choice for God King, but the rank was Loki's, and he would acknowledge it. Then his eyes caught the hammer. Is that Mjolnir? Heimdall said, surprise breaking through his composure. That alone was extraordinary. Loki had actually lifted the hammer. Loki let the corner of his mouth tilt up as if it were no great feat. I went to Midgard to retrieve Mjolnir, he said, casual and unnervingly sure. After all, it's an artifact of our heavenly palace. It cannot remain on Midgard forever. He understands, Heimdall said quietly. Loki fixed him with a look. Then guard the gate, Heimdall. Do not meddle in things that are not yours. Yes, Heimdall bowed his head. Satisfied, Loki turned and walked away. Heimdall watched his retreating figure until the last ripple of movement vanished. Then his gaze swept outward to Midgard. Through the shimmer of the worlds, he could make out the S-Shield base. Thor, pale and motionless, lying on a hospital bed. Heimdall's senses hunted for Mjolnir across the earth. Nothing. No hammer in the meteor crater, none with that strange metal being called Optimus Prime, nowhere on Midgard. The hammer Loki now bore must be real. That could not be. Loki had never been able to lift it before. Thor's condition was worrying. Heimdall should warn Sif and Volstagg at once. He raised his hand to call them with his sight, then, without warning, his thought dissolved. A fog slid through his mind. The message vanished before it formed. He found himself rooted to the center of the Frost Palace, fingers wrapped around Hofende, standing guard over the Bifrost as if nothing had happened. A cold laugh slipped from the void. Loki, concealed by shadows, sneered, "Still trying to tip them off, are you? How quaint." He had known for some time where Heimdall's loyalties lay. He had just used his newly acquired ability to slip into the void and siphon away Heimdall's ill intent. The sensation of that power thrumming inside him filled Loki with a rush of confidence. With this trickery bending even the laws of nature, he thought, the 9 realms would one day lie beneath his heel. The gift Amon had given him was rooted mainly in the Marauder pathway, a perfect fit for Loki's temperament. In practical terms, Loki could now draw on power comparable to a Sequence 3 Mentor of Deceit from that pathway. A Mentor of Deceit does more than confuse and mislead opponents until they make fatal mistakes. They can also deceive the fabric of reality itself. For example, when a kerosene lamp runs out and the flame should die, a Mentor of Deceit can trick the lamp into keeping its light, an outright deception of natural law. Amon hadn't handed the power over unchanged. He stripped away the pathway's most dangerous talent, parasitism, and reworked several other traits. Still, the endowment wasn't pure Marauder. Amon wove in elements from the Apprentice and Seer pathways as well, giving Loki a more varied, and in his view, more useful set of tools. Loki's ability to return directly from Earth to Asgard and to hide in the void, evading Heimdall's notice, both came from the Apprentice pathway. Amon had mastered the uniqueness of 3 pathways for more than a decade, and his control over them was already exceptional. For powers below angel level, he could grant almost any ability to another being, though whether the recipient could survive that gift was another matter. If Loki hadn't had the frost giant physiology, the The moment Amon imposed the power, he would have mutated into a monster. Unable to withstand the strain, he would have degenerated into a nightmarish heap of rotting flesh. What Amon gave was power, not the intrinsic Beyonder essence. That meant if Loki's link to Amon were ever cut, the bestowed abilities would vanish with the connection, but the changes those powers had already wrought on his body and soul would not revert. The transformation was permanent. As he walked, Loki turned the problem over in his mind. How to punish the people of the Heavenly Palace and force them to recognize him as their God King. Loki was awake to his situation. He was only acting as God King because Odin had fallen into the Odin's Leap, and many in the realm still refused to obey him. He had to use the window of opportunity to build his authority. I'll start by announcing to the Heavenly Palace that I can lift Mjolnir, he thought. At the S-Yield base in Mexico, Optimus Prime found Tony Stark and leaned close to whisper. "Tony, the hammer's gone." "The hammer?" Tony blinked, then realized which hammer Optimus meant. "You mean Mjolnir? How could it be gone? You're the only one here who can lift it, right?" Optimus looked puzzled. "I don't know when it disappeared. I only noticed when Thor came by to try again. I attempted to summon Mjolnir myself, but there was no response." Tony frowned. "Could it have been that enemy we faced earlier? He was furious when you lifted it." Optimus shook his head. "Impossible. That person couldn't lift Mjolnir." Tony's mind raced through possibilities. If not him, then it could only be Odin. "Maybe the old God King took Mjolnir back because he was mad you were using it?" someone suggested. They talked for a long time, but turned up nothing. Finally, Tony sighed and offered an idea. "I'll go find that kid Leon. He's got ridiculous luck. Maybe if we talk to him, he can tell us why the hammer disappeared." Optimus Prime nodded. "Bumblebee and I will sweep the base." While Iron Man and Optimus were in New Mexico with Thor searching for the hammer, Peter was back at Professor Connors' lab, finishing his internship duties. Kurt Connors was staring at the projection in stunned delight. "Peter, you're a lifesaver," Connors said, almost breathless. Peter stepped to the side, watching the data as modest as ever. "You're exaggerating, Professor. I only worked out the equation." Connors laughed, genuinely relieved and amused. "Exaggerating? Don't be ridiculous. I've been stuck on that decay algorithm for years. You solved it in a single go. I have to admit it, geniuses really do exist." "My research has finally made a real breakthrough," Professor Kurt Connors announced, eyes bright. "I think we'll have results any day now." He glanced over at Peter with the easy affection of a mentor who was also a friend. The two of them had a habit of teasing one another between tests. Connors filled a syringe and injected a white lab mouse, its little hind leg set awkwardly in a cast, with the experimental medicine. They settled into their chairs and watched patiently as the animal stirred. After a moment, Connors switched topics with a grin. "So, Peter, what's going on with Gwen? Have you told her how you feel yet?" Peter blinked, caught off guard. Professor, we're in the middle of an experiment," he said, trying to sound indignant. "Shouldn't we be waiting for the results?" Connors laughed, nudging him with a conspiratorial look. "Results aren't just for the lab, kid. If a good thing's right in front of you, you need to seize it. Don't end up like me, a lonely bachelor who never took his own advice." "Professor, didn't you spend all your energy on research?" Peter asked. Connors absently touched the empty sleeve where his arm used to be and gave a small, rueful smile. "Peter, we're talking about you and Gwen now. Don't rope me into this. How about this? Tomorrow you two come over and I'll cook you a proper meal. Consider it a celebration." "That sounds great," Peter said. "But will you be doing the cooking yourself? Do you need any help? I can't claim to be a great chef, but I can be useful as an assistant." Connors' expression went soft. Peter, don't underestimate me. Missing a hand hasn't stopped me from cooking. I've been without it for decades. I've learned how to do things one-handed. Besides, you should know Otto, right? Otto and I are actually on very good terms. He once suggested building me a bionic arm." Peter's eyes widened. "Really? With his neural interface device?" "Exactly. He told me the arm he could make wouldn't just match a real arm. It would be more flexible, more responsive. He swears his neural interface is that advanced. In his mind, that work alone could be Nobel-worthy, but he's always been absorbed in that artificial sun project and never followed through with the arm." Peter leaned forward, curious. Then why didn't you accept Dr. Octavius's offer? Connors sighed, looking away for a moment. It wasn't a single thing, Peter. For one, Otto's focus is intense. When he's fixated, other promises get left on the shelf. He suggested the arm, then dove back into his son, and the project never got the attention the prototype needed. And honestly, he gave a half smile, rueful and a little stubborn. I'm used to living with one hand. It's become part of who I am. I didn't want to feel like I owed someone for something that should be mine to accept on my own terms. He shrugged. Also, there are risks with any interface that ties into the nervous system. Otto's stuff is brilliant, but it's still technology that reaches into your mind and muscles. I've had enough of experiments gone wrong to know that you don't hand over your body lightly. Peter nodded slowly, taking it in. Makes sense. Still, if he ever finishes it, a super flexible arm does sound tempting. Connors chuckled. Tempting, yes, but don't worry, I'll handle the cooking tomorrow. You bring Gwen and an appetite, and Peter? He tapped the empty sleeve lightly as if making a small, private joke. Bring those dubious assistant skills of yours, too. They might come in handy. Otto's bionic arm? Wouldn't a prosthetic that's even more flexible than a normal right arm be incredibly useful? Peter said, trying to sound casual. Professor Connors' face tightened. Peter, you're still young. When you get my age, you learn that everyone has some conviction, a stubborn pride they can't let go of. Mine is this. I want my arm back, truly mine. I've been working toward that for decades. If I were younger, maybe I'd have taken Otto up on his offer, but at this point, I want a real arm. Peter studied the professor. He'd been thinking this cross-species genetic research might explain things about Gwen's mutation. He let the question out gently. Have you ever tried using other animals in your work? Spiders, ants? If humans had the strength of an ant or the wall-crawling ability of a spider, that would be something else. Connors considered the idea, then nodded slowly. That's an excellent suggestion, Peter. Once the lizard work succeeds, it's a natural direction to explore. Insects, arachnids, who knows? But up until now, I've focused solely on lizards. I haven't used any other species to try to restore my arm. I see, Peter murmured, turning the information over in his head. Peter's eyes locked on the white mouse inside the glass enclosure, and he blurted out, Professor, look, it's changing. Professor Kurt Connors hurried over and peered in. The mouse was frantically scrambling about, and at the sight of its amputated limb, a pink, fleshy granulation tissue was rapidly forming, a new foreleg growing back before their eyes. It's a success, Connors cried, a grin spreading across his face as he leaned in for a closer look. They had injected the mouse with the lizard serum, hoping to trigger the reptile's remarkable regenerative ability. Now it appeared to be working. The effect is incredible. The regeneration is happening so fast, Peter said, equally amazed. Connor's excitement bubbled over. We'll run a few more tests and monitor it for months. If there are no adverse effects, we can move toward clinical trials. Haha, Peter, I can already see it. Your name, Peter Parker, and mine, Kurt Connors, in the biology textbooks. He stood there, caught up in the vision of a bright future. Clinical trials wouldn't normally be possible that quickly, but Connors' project had the backing of Osborn Corporation. The company was taking the work very seriously, and that made it possible to fast-track the trials within months. I can already imagine what your right arm will look like after it regenerates, Professor, Peter said with a grin. They stayed in the lab a while longer, tying up loose ends, until Peter announced he had to go. It's getting late. It's already tomorrow, he said. If I head home any later, Aunt May and Uncle Ben will start to worry. I should get back. Professor, I'm off. Try to get some rest, and don't forget to bring Gwen tomorrow. I won't, Connors promised. Peter left. Connors straightened the lab and was just about to call it a night when his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and saw the name of the Osborn Corporation liaison. He'd known Osborn was the project's investor, and he'd heard rumors that Norman Osborn's health was failing and that this research was expected to help. He wasn't sure how much of that was true. He answered the call, feeling suddenly more aware of how much was riding on the work. Kurt Connors' smile, the kind that had bloomed across his face when the experiment finally showed promise, vanished as soon as he heard the voice on the other end of the line. He listened, then forced a nod and answered in as steady a voice as he could manage. My experiment has already made real progress. In 2 weeks at most, no, in 1 week, I can produce results that will satisfy Mr. Osborn. Cutting off the funding now will set us back severely. Please, don't do that. All right, came the reply. Bring the results to Mr. Osborn next Tuesday. The call ended with a single chirp. Connors sagged into his chair and stared numb at the lively white mouse scurrying inside the glass box. He flung his phone to the floor in frustration. Why now? He barked at nobody. Just give me a few more months. 2 months. Earlier, the company's representative had told him Osborn Corp was withdrawing its investment. They had grown tired of what they called a long run without meaningful progress. Desperate, Connors had promised to produce demonstrable results within a week, hoping that one breakthrough could buy him the funding he needed. If this didn't work, he and his research would be thrown away. Connors muttered the thought under his breath, then reached into a drawer and took out several white mice. With a steady hand and a scalpel, he removed each animal's forelimbs, injected the wounds with the lizard serum, and placed them in separate glass enclosures. If there are no adverse effects, he whispered to himself, I'll perform the human trial on me tomorrow. His voice was barely audible, as if he were speaking only to himself. Cheers! 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 At the dinner table, Connors, Peter, and Gwen raised their glasses. Peter and Gwen clinked soft drink cups. Neither of them was 21 yet, so no alcohol. For a few moments, the strain of the lab fell away from Connors's face as he looked at the 2 young people across from him. Gwen, he said, smiling, Peter told me your grades are outstanding. Have you thought about where you want to apply? I'd be happy to write you a recommendation. Don't let the missing arm fool you. I still have a good reputation in academia. With my letter, there aren't many schools in the States you couldn't get into. Thank you so much, Professor, Gwen replied. Aren't you teaching at Empire State University? I'm planning to go to Empire State University with Peter, Gwen announced. Professor Connors smiled, genuinely pleased. Excellent choice. That's where I teach, and my alma mater. So many years have gone by, I really miss it. After the big meal, Peter and Gwen stood to leave and thanked him. Peter hesitated. Professor, is there anything in the lab I can help with? Connors looked a little distracted and waved him off. No, don't worry. The research is at a stable stage now. I'm mostly just recording experimental data. I can handle it. Peter, take advantage of the holiday. Go out and have fun with Gwen. Don't spend it cooped up in a lab with an old man like me. He couldn't risk having Peter around at this point. If Peter saw the work, he'd complain that human trials were too dangerous and try to stop things, and the whole experiment would be delayed. Okay, Professor, we're off then, Peter said. As they headed out the door, Gwen glanced at him. Peter, does Professor Connors seem a little off to you? 78. Peter, danger. Peter answered without thinking. Strange? Maybe he's excited about a major breakthrough in the experiment. I was excited last night, too. I could hardly sleep. Gwen shook her head. That's not excitement. If his body mutated, his senses would be sharper. I could clearly feel Professor Connors' sorrow. He was hiding it, but he hid it so well you wouldn't have noticed. Peter ran a hand through his hair. He trusted Gwen. She had no reason to make something like that up. Still, he tried to reason it out. If the professor's experiment just had a big breakthrough, why would he be sad? Maybe something went wrong, and he sent me away because he didn't want me worrying. It clicked for Peter before he could stop it. The explanation made sense. Gwen agreed. Why don't you go down to Professor Connors' lab and check? Don't let anything actually be wrong. We can still make the battle suit together tomorrow. They had agreed to spend today building Gwen's suit and the web shooters she'd designed. Gwen already had the plans finished. She was just waiting for the build. Peter hesitated a beat, then said, All right, Gwen, you can head home by yourself. I'll check on the professor's lab. Okay. Gwen nodded and left. Inside Professor Kurt Connors' laboratory, several lively white mice darted around a glass enclosure. Where their legs had once been severed, new limbs had grown back cleanly. There were no signs of rejection or other complications. Connors stood staring at them, breathing slowly, trying to steady himself. The success with the mice should have been encouraging, but it left him conflicted. Those results were hardly definitive. At best, they offered him psychological reassurance. Human trials, he told himself, normally took well over a year, months of careful observation and testing to rule out delayed effects. Only an epidemic would justify rushing that process. He looked at the empty sleeve where his arm had been, and then around the lab at the equipment and the notes that had consumed years of his life. He drew in a long breath, reached for the vial of serum he had prepared on the nearby table, and without further hesitation drove the syringe into his own arm. Curt Connors sat at the lab bench and watched the vial. According to his calculations, the serum should take effect in about 10 minutes. All he had to do was wait. After a few minutes, a wave of dizziness washed over him. Had he been at it too long? He felt his eyes grow heavy, and before he could fight it, he sank back onto the bench and fell into a deep sleep. Some indeterminate time later, someone's voice pulled him from the dark. "Professor Connors! Professor Connors!" He blinked himself awake and pushed himself upright. Peter was standing over him. "Peter, weren't you with Gwen? Why are you here?" Connors asked, bewildered. Peter stepped closer, his expression half fear, half anger. "Professor, you experimented on yourself. What were you thinking? We've only tested the serum on lab mice, and not even for a full day. You of all people know how dangerous that is." "How did you know?" Connors murmured, a thought forming at the edge of his mind. He glanced down at his right arm. Where there had been nothing but an empty sleeve, a perfectly formed, unscarred human arm had replaced it, soft, whole, like a child's. A laugh burst out of him. "Ha! It worked. My arm grew back, and the funding won't be cut off." Curt Connors slapped his newly regenerated right hand over his face and laughed, tears springing to his eyes. The sound was half hysteria, half relief. "Professor, not so loud," Peter said, trying to be firm. "I'm glad your arm grew back too, but you can't just start human trials like this. Come with me, let me check you out. There could be complications we don't see yet." He guided Curt to a quieter corner and began a quick inspection. As he worked, a question occurred to him. "Professor," Peter asked, pausing, "what did you mean earlier about funding?" Curt's grin faded a little. "That's the point," he said. "The experiment worked. I'm going to Osborne Corporation today to tell them and secure more money for further trials." Peter's brow furrowed. "So you risked experimenting on yourself because Osborne was thinking about pulling the plug?" he said incredulously. "That's not right. Didn't you already tell their rep the project had hit a major breakthrough? Why would they withdraw support unless they were completely blind to the results?" Curt Connors said flatly, "Norman Osborn probably couldn't wait any longer. I've heard he's been fighting a stubborn illness for some time. That's why Osborne Corporation poured so much into biomedicine. It sounds like his condition has reached a critical point, but luckily our experiment worked." He had clearly thought about Osborne's sudden withdrawal of funds before. Now, calm, the pieces fell into place. Peter blinked. "Mr. Osborne, Harry's father? I don't think Harry ever mentioned that." "Harry?" Curt's voice went sharp with surprise. "Peter, you know Harry Osborne?" He sounded almost incredulous. "Harry and I were desk mates for 2 years. We got along well, but he's been abroad for the last few years, and we lost touch." Curt felt the situation was a grim joke. If he'd known sooner that Peter knew Harry, he wouldn't have felt forced to test the procedure on himself. If Peter had told Harry, Harry could have reached his father and the whole funding issue might have been resolved. Instead, Curt had taken the risk, and now it turned out it may not have been necessary at all. What a cruel bit of fate. Curt Connors sighed and shook his head. "Fate is strange, isn't it?" Peter frowned. "Professor, what do you mean? Also, your body temperature is weird." He tapped the readout on the handheld scanner again, brow furrowing. "It's only 25 degrees Celsius. That's dangerously low." Curt blinked. He hadn't felt cold at all. "That low?" he repeated, surprised. The two of them exchanged a look and then a tentative theory. The lizard serum. "Maybe it's from the serum," Peter said. "Let me check you more thoroughly. Take off your coat." Curt didn't hesitate. He shrugged out of his white lab coat and peeled off his shirt. The fluorescent lights picked out the lines of his torso. Peter's surprise softened into an awkward, half-amused tone. "Wow, Professor, you work out? You've got a really solid build." Curt glanced down, hardly believing it. His chest was firm, his abdomen cut into a defined 8-pack, details he hadn't noticed in years of worrying over experiments. Peter's voice turned more clinical as he leaned in to inspect the skin along Kurt's back. "Do you have any skin issues?" he asked. "There's a patch of green, like a scaly keratin layer, along your scapula." Kurt frowned and ran a hand over the spot he couldn't quite reach. A skin condition? He felt no stinging, no irritation, only a cold, odd smoothness under his palm. They stood there for a moment, both thinking the same thing but neither wanting to say it aloud. The scanner still read 25 degrees. The patch of green looked less like a rash and more like a new texture to his skin. Whatever this was, it wasn't a normal reaction, and it seemed to be getting stranger by the minute. "No, I don't," Kurt Connors snapped. "Then is this a side effect? Growing scales like a lizard?" Peter answered, already reaching for a pair of tweezers on the lab bench. He plucked a small green scale from the keratinous patch along Connor's arm and set it carefully on the work surface under the bright lamp. As the scale sat between them, Connor's mind went foggy, as if something unseen were pressing at his thoughts. He blinked and tried to steady himself, but the pressure only increased. Peter didn't notice. He was focused on the specimen, turning it slightly to catch the light. Something else in the lab began to stir. From the nearby glass enclosure, the white mice started thrashing wildly, slamming into the sides until the whole case trembled. "Professor, one of the mice has gone berserk. Do you know what's wrong with it?" Peter called without looking you. There was no answer. He tried again, louder this time. "Professor, are you there?" A low, unfamiliar growl answered him from behind. Peter's hands froze. He finally spun around, and a green, clawed hand lunged for him. Across the room, Gwen felt it like a spike through her chest. Her spider sense flared. She had been lying in bed when she suddenly shot upright, clutching her chest. "Peter," she gasped, "would you like me to revise the rest of the chapter in the same style?" Chapter 79. Quickly transform into Kamen Rider. Gwen didn't hesitate. She flipped toward the window, opened it, and vaulted out. She landed on the fire escape and sprinted, then launched herself across the gap between buildings, racing toward Professor Connors' lab. Her spider sense, the name she'd given to the strange new warning feeling, was screaming at her that Peter was in trouble. After days of having her powers, she already knew how it worked. Not just a danger alarm, but a vague, gut-level nudge, the kind of sixth sense people talk about. "Peter, you have to be okay," she shouted into the night as she cut through the city on rooftops, every step driven by the panic in her chest. Darkness. Endless, suffocating darkness. Peter Parker's consciousness drifted in it, untethered. A voice, not quite human, not quite anything, threaded itself through his awareness. "Congratulations. You're about to die." Peter, foggy and disoriented, couldn't help snapping back even as he slid toward nothingness. "What's so congratulatory about dying?" "Are you an envoy from hell, come to collect your quota?" Peter croaked. A small voice answered before he could doze off again. "You're only in a state of suspended animation right now. If you wait much longer, you'll actually die." The fog in Peter's head cleared in an instant. Who wanted to die? "Can you save me?" he asked. "I remember a claw tearing through my chest. That should be fatal. And who are you? Where is this?" He pushed his attention toward the voice and finally made out the speaker. It was a bizarre little person, no taller than an adult's forearm. Its face was thickly painted like a clown or the Joker, black and red grease paint streaked into a permanent grin. It wore a tiny top hat and a suit that somehow looked both old-fashioned and theatrical. Sprouting from its back were a pair of pure white wings, angelic if rendered in some strange stylized way. Peter blinked. There was something oddly familiar about the figure, but he couldn't place it. "This is your mind island," the creature said. "It's dark here because you're close to death. As for whether I can save you, do you honestly think I'd show up just to chat because I saw you were about to die? As for who I am, you can call me the Clown Angel." When Peter heard that this stranger was here to save him, he couldn't hold back his relief. He practically burst with excitement. "You, Clown Angel, what do we do? I mean, I want to come back to life fast. I don't want to die." "It's simple. You need to transfer your injury, then clear your consciousness. But there's one more thing you'll need." The Clown Angel waved a hand, and a few cards and a belt materialized in front of Peter. Choose one of these. Peter stared at the cards, bewildered. What are these? Only 3 of the cards bore designs, the rest were blank. They give you superhuman strength. Those 3 are the basic cards. With the belt, you can transform into a powerful Kamen Rider. Right now, you can choose only one of the 3 as your base card. The blank cards you'll have to collect and activate yourself. You're talking too fast. I don't get any of this, Peter blurted. If you didn't know what a card or a belt had to do with resurrection, or what a Kamen Rider was, it all sounded like a child's fairy tale. You don't need to understand. Just draw a card, and you'll live. Okay. Peter stared down at the 3 patterned cards. When he turned the first over, his eyes widened. He knew that face, which explained why Clown Angel's costume had seemed so familiar. It was Klein Moretti from Marvel Clash, dressed in a gentleman's suit and a top hat, smiling from the center of the card. A single word was printed beneath, Seer. The second card showed a man Peter didn't recognize, a yellow bowler hat, gold-rimmed glasses, a beard, and a trench coat. Under it was another label, Great Detective. The last card depicted a man in a silk top hat and black trench coat, wearing glasses and black gloves, a revolver in his hand, and a wild, hardened express, ion on his face. The caption read, Great Adventurer. What is all this? Peter thought, memory of old cartoons stirring at the edges of his mind. Then, hesitantly, he asked, These aren't summon cards, are they? Like one of those toys where you shout and the character pops out? Peter asked. Clown Angel shook his head. No, these cards grant you the abilities of the character on the card when you use them. The card you pick now becomes your base card, your foundational ability. Everything else you gain later will stack on top of it. Oh, Peter studied the 3 cards again, weighing his options. If this was his starting ability, he wanted the strongest one. The Seer looked like a fraud. The Great Detective seemed to only boost deductive thinking. The Great Adventurer, though, looked powerful, and its portrait was a little unsettling. After a moment, Peter reached for the 3rd card, the Great Adventurer. It felt right. As soon as he chose it, Clown Angel waved his hand, and the other 2 cards dissolved. The belt that had been floating between them snapped to life and slid around Peter's waist on its own. All set, Clown Angel said. You've picked your base card. Now go back to the real world and keep fighting. If you have trouble, just call my name in your mind. Before Peter could make sense of the words, the dark dimension wavered and began to collapse. The Clown Angel dissolved into nothing. Back in the lab, Gwen was scrabbling to save him. She'd gotten there 2 minutes earlier. The place was a wreck. Priceless instruments lay in pieces, strewn across the floor as if some violent force had torn through the room. Peter lay slumped in front of the workbench, motionless. A fist-sized hole gaped in his chest. Blood poured out, pooling on the floor and soaking the front of his shirt. Gwen pressed both hands against the wound and shook him, breathless with panic. "Don't die! Don't die!" she cried, her voice cracking. Tears mixed with his blood as they ran down the back of her hand. She had never felt so helpless. Peter Parker didn't have a pulse. He wasn't breathing. Then something odd happened. A business card, Amon's card, the one Peter had kept in his pocket, lifted out as if pulled by a string. It hovered, then shifted shape in midair, becoming what looked like a character card and a belt. The belt floated to Peter's waist and fastened itself. The little card slid into a slot on the belt with a soft click. Music began to swell from nowhere, low and insistent. Light spilled from Peter's body, slow at first, then brighter. His chest rose. The glow lifted him a few inches off the floor. Gwen stared, hands still pressed to the wound, as Peter's limp form began to float, alive again, bathed in that strange, humming light. A swelling soundtrack filled the air. Peter's chest wound sealed itself, and with a sharp bang his clothes tore open. Panels of a plastic-like trench coat snapped into place, molding over his body. An otherworldly voice, Clown Angel's, neither entirely human nor wholly mechanical, intoned, "Kamen Rider, Great Adventurer form. Transformation complete." Peter blinked his eyes open to find Gwen launching herself into his arms. She clung to him, burying her face against his chest and gasping with relief. "Oh, thank God, Peter. You're not dead!" "That hole in your chest looked so bad," I thought. Peter's voice came out strained and half-laughing. "Gwen, get off me. I can't breathe." Chapter 80, Fantastic Ability Cards. When Peter's strangled voice finally reached her, Gwen immediately let go of him. She'd gotten carried away in her relief and had been squeezing far too hard. If this were the old Peter, he would have been in rough shape and waiting for Clown Angel to come save him again. "I'm alive. Again," Peter wheezed, working his shoulders and chest where Gwen had been crushing him only moments before. Seeing him move and breathe, Gwen's worry snapped into questions. "Peter, what happened? Why did you have a hole in your chest just now? What's going on?" Peter glanced down at the coat he wore. It wasn't so much a trench coat as it was armor, something that looked like it belonged on a different layer from the rest of their clothes. He shivered, the memory coming back to him in pieces. "I was doing an experiment with Professor Connors, and then—" He trailed off, swallowing hard as the scene returned. "Something with a green claw. It went straight through my chest." He grew more anxious as the image solidified. "Gwen, did you see a green lizard man? About this tall." He raised his hand to indicate the height. It was Professor Connors. "A lizard man? Professor Connors?" Gwen's eyes widened. "I didn't see any lizard like that." "Tell me more clearly. I'm a little fuzzy right now," Gwen said. "You said Professor Connors turned into a big lizard? How can a living person turn into a lizard?" Peter reached up reflexively to scratch his head and froze. His fingers brushed felt instead of hair. He was wearing a top hat. "What a weird thing to be wearing," he muttered, tugging it slightly lopsided. On the lab bench, a small creature kept pressing against the glass of its cage. Peter picked up the cage and held it out so Gwen could see. "Look," he said. "This white mouse, well, it used to be a white mouse. Professor injected it with an incomplete version of the serum. It changed." Gwen peered into the glass. The animal inside was no longer a clean little mouse. Its skin had taken on a scaly, greenish sheen, and its movements were jerky and agitated. It looked as if someone had stitched lizard parts onto a rodent. She turned to Peter, incredulous. "You're calling that a white mouse?" Peter took a breath and tried to explain as simply as he could. "The same thing happened to Professor Connors, except much more extreme. Remember, I'm working with him. The project is cross-species gene transfer. The goal is to give one animal the physiological advantages of another by transferring genes. But the serum he used here was incomplete and unstable. In small animals it produced this," he gestured to the caged creature. "In him it triggered a full-blown transformation. He became a large reptile, and not exactly pleasant to be around." Gwen watched the little lizard rodent pace and press itself against the glass, agitated and clearly not comfortable. The logic of it was absurd and horrible at once. "So it's genetic engineering gone wrong," she said slowly. "Not magic." "Exactly," Peter said. "Wrong is the best word. The professor had grafted lizard DNA into himself to regrow his severed right arm. The procedure hadn't gone as planned. His arm had indeed regenerated, but the professor seemed to have lost his mind." "I think I get it a little now, but what happened to you?" Gwen pressed. Peter fought the reflex to scratch his head, set the glass cage back on the lab bench, and rubbed the back of his neck instead. "I'm not really sure either," he admitted. "A strange little man rescued me and gave me this ability. I still haven't figured out how to use it." After a beat, he added, "We should find the professor first. He's in a bad way, and if he gets out there, he'll cause a lot of damage." Gwen nodded. "If he's turned into that huge lizard man, he'll leave behind a lot of tracks. We can follow them." Peter glanced toward the door that had been smashed by some tremendous force. A few minutes later, they reached a nearby manhole. Peter crouched, scanned the ground, and then looked up at Gwen with a helpless expression. "The tracks stop here." "Professor must have gone into the sewers, which makes this a lot harder," Peter said with a sigh. New York's drainage system, dating back to the 17th century, was labyrinthine. Finding a lizard man in there wasn't exactly like finding a needle in a haystack, but it wasn't simple either. "I wish I'd picked the seer card back then," he muttered. "Maybe I could have used its power to locate Connors directly." "What are you talking about?" Gwen asked, curious. "Nothing," Peter replied evasively. "It's tied up with my current situation. Hard to explain." From his waist came Clown Angel's cold, inhuman voice. "Foolish Peter Parker. Your current state can divine as well. You just don't know how to use it." What Clown Angel didn't tell him was that the three character cards actually shared the same ability. They only differed in appearance once they transformed. Peter blinked. This card can divinate too? How's that different from the seer? Never mind. Clown Angel, how do I do it? I still don't know how to use the power you gave me. On the left side of your belt, there's a card holder. Inside are the skills you can use. To use a skill, take out the card and put it into the card slot in the middle of your belt. Peter reached for his waist and found the card box exactly where the voice had said. He fumbled with it and awkwardly pulled out a handful of cards. The first one was the divination card. Its surface was crowded with descriptions of every sort of divination: tarot, poker reading, pendulum work, staff divination, astrology, an entire catalog of methods. So many ways to divinate, he muttered, but he didn't try the card. Instead, he flipped through the others. He wanted to know what abilities he had after the transformation so he wouldn't miss an obvious solution later because he didn't realize he had the right skill. Only 8 of the cards he pulled out had any writing on them. The rest were blank. Do I have to collect abilities myself? He wondered, remembering what the little angel had told him. The second card he examined was labeled Fire Jump. Its description explained that it let him blink between flames within a certain radius and made him immune to fire while using it. The next card was Fire Manipulation, the ability to control flames. It looked like it could be used together with Fire Jump. Peter ran through the possibilities. He could shape the fire to a precise spot, then use Fire Jump to instantly flash to that location. The card after that was Wound Transfer. Once activated, it could move a wound to another place or even onto an object. A slow click of understanding snapped into place in Peter's mind. Is that why I woke up to find my clothes blown apart? Clown Angel must have transferred the wound on my chest into my shirt, then made the shirt explode. The fifth card was Paperman Substitute, which let a pre-made paper effigy take damage in your place. Part of the card's description was blurred, hinting at other uses Peter couldn't read yet. The card had to be activated beforehand. It wouldn't help if you only tried to use it after you'd already been hurt. He already knew his belt held 3 ability card slots. To activate any power, the corresponding card had to be slotted in, so at most, he could have 3 abilities running at once. The Paperman Substitute card had to be inserted beforehand to be used. The 6th card was Air Bullet, a very straightforward ability that fired projectiles made of compressed air, with a maximum impact close to that of a sniper rifle round. Peter muttered, if it's going to take up one of my card slots, why not just carry a pistol? That would free one up. The 7th was Faceless, an ability to change your appearance into that of someone of roughly the same build, even swapping into different clothes as part of the transformation. With this, I could save money on clothes, Peter thought. His mind always wandered to odd things like that. Putting aside the strange tangent, he turned his attention to the last card that actually had any information on it.